Sacred Symbols, a PlayStation podcast, is brought to you by, well, you. If you want to learn how to support our show, go to patreon.com/laststandmedia. Greetings and salutations. Welcome back to Sacred Symbols, a PlayStation podcast. This is episode number 186. My name is Colin Moriarty. I'm joined as always by Chris Reid. Chris, how are you today, my friend?
I'm well. You know, it's another day. It's snowy around where I'm at, so it's kind of it's nice to look outside for right now before it gets, slushy and gross and gray.
Sure. Well, I totally understand. Actually, let me look. I don't want to look out my window. I'm too lazy to open the fucking blinds, but it's supposed to turn from rain to snow today, and I got to get out there maybe after this and shovel. I kind of like flexing a little bit by getting out there and shoveling first in my neighborhood. It's like, yeah, my shit's
everyone
done.
hates you.
Just doing this.
Yeah. People have meetings about you.
Oh, I hope they do. But yeah, I like being out there and doing my thing. But Dustin Furman, executive producer, welcome. How are you?
Thank you. I'm great. I'm feeling particularly, I don't know, is on fire the right word? Like NBA Jam? Just like we've had a great week of content. Our Patreon numbers are doing well. I feel blessed. Like we've got the best job in the world, and it's like the best time right now. So I don't know, I'm feeling thankful.
It says a lot about our show that, and I think the respect our show has and the interest our show has, frankly, that when PlayStation's major rival buys the biggest publisher in the world, they want to hear what we have to say, which is a nice compliment. And of course the Dukes as well, which just put up an episode of their own going into it on the Xbox side. And we're going to get into all of that, of course, but I want to welcome everyone. Sacred Symbols, our weekly PlayStation podcast here on Patreon, YouTube, podcast services, etc. Remember, support us on Patreon, patreon.com/laststandmedia, where more than 12,500 of you support us. Woo. Pretty cool. We appreciate that very much. Remember, you can get early ad-free access to 2 episodes of Sacred Symbols plus a week. One of those episodes is an hour-plus conversation all about Activision and Blizzard and King being purchased by Microsoft. We are going to make that free, so if you're on Patreon, you've already heard it. If you're not on Patreon, just check YouTube in the coming days. We'll make sure to get that up. That'll be kind of a prelude to what we're going to talk about there today. But thank you for your kind support over there at patreon.com/laststandmedia. Submit questions, comments, concerns, thoughts, and ideas. Get your names in the credit, and so on and so forth. By the way, Sacred Symbols Plus topics recently. Vincent Gennito, who was quote unquote Me Too'd recently, or not recently, but came back recently from a Me Too a few years ago. I have a conversation about labor unions coming up and Christianity, Gran Turismo 7, awesome conversation about Gran Turismo 7. Excited about that. Interview with Jeff Ross in the can. That was actually going to go live already, but we bumped it. I felt like it would be a bad time to put such an awesome conversation into the wild. Kabuto Kishi wrote into us on Patreon and said, "Hey, sacred slit heads, gotta watch out with the hard R," he says.
Jesus Christ.
My wife and I recently found out we're expecting a baby due to drop in July. I was curious about you guys coming and possibly recording Sacred Symbols in the delivery room. I really think the audio quality would pop off in a big way with the miracle sounds of birth added in. If you guys come, I'll give the baby the middle name that's wild, roundhead, indeed, eldritch. Gaming credentials stand down. Thanks, boys. That's like some sort of Spanish 14th century name that goes on for several minutes. Guys, what do you think about going and doing an episode live in the delivery room? Get some squishy noises, some baby noises, some doctors shuffling about.
I feel like that'd be a very unsanitary.
Yeah.
I feel like we
could wear a full getup.
We'd have to be in like hazmat suits because we'd introduce so many wild pathogens to those, fresh, like new bodies. I don't think I don't think it'd be a good idea for anybody.
Fresh bodies. Oh man.
Here's the thing: is that Sacred Symbols doesn't need a gimmick. But if we did, I've always thought about this idea of various places to podcast. This is a great example. I still want to do, Colin, when your pool is open.
Yeah.
Sacred Symbols Plus from the pool. I don't know how on a technical side we're going to mic ourselves up, but I think that's a possibility.
You just had to have boom mics. Overhead.
That would work. Just right in the pool.
That would be fun. Yeah. It's funny you should bring up the pool because we have dates to get the concrete done around the pool, and it was supposed to be last week and then this week, and the weather is just totally fine. And then when the date comes, that's supposed to be, it starts to snow and rain. And that is not what's happening now, because they were supposed to come tomorrow. But we can't close the pool until the concrete's in, because they have to put like these beams in and stuff like that. So the pool's just open, and it's like an inch from the top because it's raining so much. And I was out there today with a 4-gallon bucket, just bailing the pool out. Probably got like 100 gallons by hand out of that thing. So we have some work yet to do, but I am confident. We got the landscaping being done in March. I am confident this thing that I'm doing in the backyard is going to be done sooner rather than later. So you guys are very welcome, and we can do whatever sorts of productions you feel are necessary.
Whatever kind of productions.
Whatever kinds of productions you want. I've stayed at places in LA that were definitely used in porn. Like you can tell, and I'm sure Chris knows what I'm talking about. Like there's just
100%.
Yeah, it's well, whatever. All right. My cousin Vinny wrote in. Said, "Hey, sloppy boys, would you rather shit every time you fart or puke every time you burp?"
Oh my God.
This is easy.
Oh,
puke,
okay.
I guess.
Please.
You have to go shit every time you fart. But I guess it depends on who you are. I have total control of farts.
Oh, I see. Oh,
a burp can slip out at any moment without you realizing. I'd have thrown up probably like 1 million times on this podcast by this point.
You can't control your burps?
I'm just saying it's much easier to slip out a burp overall.
I guess. I don't know. I think the thing is you don't burp in your sleep, which is the big thing. Like to me, you know, I think I read like a thing recently where it's like you're farting all over the place when you sleep, and I'm like, oh man, that sounds terrible. I'm glad I'm not awake for that. But you don't burp when you. Can you imagine?
I don't know.
Like
do you not? I mean, does some gas not expel?
No, you don't full on burp in your sleep.
Yeah. I do love farting, so I have no problem with farting when I sleep. That's fine with me. I also love farting when I wake up. I mean, that's the first thing you got to do.
Of course. Now, have you guys seen the film Toy Story 2?
No.
There's a moment in that movie that Chris just made me think of where they're on top of the toy collector guy, and he's got the cheese curls fingers, and he lets out a disgusting burp as he's sleeping. So someone needs to fact check Pixar immediately, because there's conflicting,
maybe
potentially dangerous.
Chris.
Maybe fact check
let's
Chris.
Not assume that Chris knows.
Look, I've just never seen or heard of anybody burping in their sleep.
Yeah, that's fine. I don't remember. I mean, I know what you mean.
And to me, it's like I would rather just hold in a burp than wake up covered in shit.
Yeah.
All the time.
Yeah.
That's a fair point.
It's like that episode of Always Sunny in Philadelphia when they're pooping in the bed.
Yeah.
It's Frank the whole time. All right. Remedy Live wrote in and said, "Hi, Colin and gang. With all the recent controversy, I think a bigger issue has surfaced and should be addressed. David Jaffe was recently praising your show, but in a shocking twist, he went on to claim that he's in fact way more attractive than you. Just wanted your thoughts on this during these trying times for us gamers. Sorry for any bad grammar. As a dyslexic person, the war against autocorrect rages on." Thank you, Remedy Live, for writing. And we're big fans of David Jaffe. He's a personal friend of mine. Love him. Is he more attractive than me? I mean, I think that's in the eye of the beholder. I've never come out and said that I was attractive. You know, so I feel like I'm kind of being thrown about, bandied about like some sort of eye candy when I've never made myself such. I would never presume to be that. So is David Jaffe more attractive than Colin Moriarty? I'll let you decide.
We'll do a poll.
Yeah. We'll do a very scientific poll with a 3.5% margin of error.
Yeah. Pew research.
Very good. Be very good. I wanted to remind everyone, or I guess let everyone know, PlayStation Wrap Up is live, so you can actually go now and insert your name into some module. Just go to the PlayStation blog and check it out. Now, when I tried to use it, though, I'm going to try it again right now, but when I tried to use it earlier today, it told me that I wasn't in the right territory to use it.
It's definitely
because it's
wrapup.playstation.com.
What'd you say?
It's definitely fucked up right now for a lot of people. So it doesn't work for me either.
I can't believe that's something that PlayStation wouldn't work. It's also going to tell me that I played probably 7,000 hours because my PlayStation 5 is always on. That's why I don't like this feature for me, because I'm not the kind of guy that just sits down, plays, and then turns it off. So it never gives me accurate information. I have no idea.
What is this? Like, I'm trying to log in and it's giving me this insane captcha that I've never seen before. Pick the mouse that can't reach the cheese.
I've seen that.
Wait, what?
That's some bullshit right there. But yes, I've seen that.
This is such a visual mess. I can't even bother.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on here. So anyway, that's live. That's wrapup.playstation.com if you want to check it out. I wanted to just note real quick that Sony also put up a post of like 25 PS5 games, I guess, that they're anticipating, in quotes they're anticipating. And God of War is listed as a 2022 game, which is really the first indication we've gotten from them per se that the game is actually going to come out this year. I had already expressed confidence that the game's coming out this year. I really think that they're going to need it more than ever now. But Square Enix, on the other hand, was talking about some of their games coming out this year. Final Fantasy 16 not on that list. Now, it was never confirmed for 2022, but there was some speculation that it would be announced for release later this year. We'll see if that happens or not. I wanted to throw that out there. And I also wanted to remind everyone that whilst there are Horizon Forbidden West spoilers about bandying to and fro, I think that's the second time I've used that word today, all over the place. And that's a problem as the game comes out February 14th. No, that's not right. February 18th. That was in Fernax, February 14th.
Right.
February 18th. So we have a little time to go. But also there are new details on PlayStation Blog if you want to check them out. New videos. They're going to have a live stream, I think, in February. I don't know why you'd want to watch or see any of this stuff at this point. Like, we have any doubts that this game is going to be special. I'll be shocked. We hope it's not the other kind of, like, you know, when you have a friend who's kind of stupid and you say he's special, but you mean he's just dumb. We don't want Horizon to be that kind of special. We want Horizon to be a true sort of special, a 9+ sort of special. I think we're going to get that. So I wanted to throw that out there as well. A couple of things about anime and cartoons I wanted to throw around there. First of all, Cuphead, Netflix. We knew this was coming for a while, February 18th. And it's 12 episodes, 12 minutes each. So we're looking forward to that. That should translate pretty well. What do you think about that, Chris? Excited?
I'm looking forward to it. I know somebody who's on the animation team for that show. We haven't spoken much about it. It's like a very passing relationship that me and this person have. But I mean, Cuphead lends itself very well to animation. So if they can capture that style in a show, that'd be very, very interesting. I don't know what that would look like, and I'm super interested to see. I haven't seen any trailers for it at all either. I don't know if there are any, but I think it's better that I haven't seen it.
There's one that just came out with this release date, and it's cool. I don't know if you want to even hear about it, but it's it pleased me.
I'll
How
keep it a
about that? I'll
surprise.
just say I liked what I saw.
Good. That's great.
I'll say that I would be skeptical of something like this usually, but the art style of Cuphead is so beautiful and so stunning and so unique. Remember we made fun of that game, Chris? You might remember this, Dustin. You weren't on the show yet, but you were editing it, so you might remember. Remember that game that was copying Cuphead to like a complete, like, in a ridiculous degree, and was basically just a total ripoff of it? Do you know what I'm talking about? And
oh my god,
people were destroying it, and I don't think it ever actually came out. But it was, the point is that Cuphead is so unique that it's going to be impossible to copy it. And I think with that kind of style, you should leverage it.
Enchanted Portals?
Enchanted Portals. That's what it was. And it was just, I mean, Enchanted Portals looks pretty too. It's definitely not on the level. But the point I'm trying to make is that they stumbled on something so special and so inconceivable how you would ever replicate that and make it seem like it's something new. That, make a TV show about that. That's cool. I mean, it's not like some sci-fi trite shit or something like that or whatever. This is something truly unique. But yeah, Enchanted Portals. Did that game ever come out? Any word?
They went dark on Twitter. It looks like in 2020, I think. Their last tweet was a retweet of something from May of 2020. So they have
May of 2020. Hopefully COVID didn't capture them.
Hopefully not. Yeah.
All right. What else? Oh, okay. In the similar vein, Dustin, let's see if this scratches a weeb inside of you. The weeb inside of you. Shenmue. Its anime will premiere February 5th on Adult Swim and Crunchyroll. It's set in 1986 and based on the Sega franchise, of course, the famous Sega franchise. I don't know if any of us are Shenmue fans. when I was young, when I was I loved Dreamcast when I was a kid. I had it. I was into it. I wanted to like Shenmue so much because it was so much part of the identity of the console that it felt like I didn't like Sonic Adventure. I like Sonic Adventure, but I don't like Sonic. Sonic Adventure was actually pretty good, but I don't like Sonic that much. I loved Crazy Taxi and Power Stone and some of these other games, but I didn't really feel like I had anything that put me on Dreamcast like I really belonged there. And Shenmue felt like that one game, that one possibility for me. And it's still, it just wasn't it. Does this scratch anything for you?
Not in particular. Shenmue, I don't know. People either think this game is an all-time classic, or people say it's basically unplayable. It seems to be one of in one of those two camps for people, and so I've never truly given it a chance. But I don't know. It would feel wrong of me to just watch the anime after never having any experience with the game or anything like that.
I respect that.
So I don't know though. If the anime comes out and people say it's top tier, then I would definitely check it out. But
I've been seeing you watch some anime. I mean, I've been seeing you. You were tweeting about something.
JoJo.
JoJo. Yeah, JoJo.
I'm going hardcore on JoJo.
JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. But didn't you also go to a theater recently?
Yeah, I saw Belle, and it was okay. But it was.
Why did I say it like that?
Yeah, I don't know. I was gonna say something, but I thought it would be mean.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Dustin.
But yeah, I saw Belle in theaters, and it was just cool. I wanted to see an anime film in IMAX, and it was a cool experience.
You were the only ones in there?
So we were at first when I took the photo, and then as it got closer, a few other stragglers wandered in.
Denizens.
Yes.
Denizens of Pittsburgh.
But dude, here's the thing. I'm so glad because when the Demon Slayer movie came out, I saw videos of just packed theaters filled with weebs. And I know that these are technically my people, but it did not look like a place I would enjoy being at.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, I mean, that's like the meme with the bar soap and like I love the meme with the guy that has like the bandolier of deodorant.
Yeah.
He's ready to go.
It's the Resident Evil 4 merchant or something.
Yeah, it's good stuff. We're obviously working on a merch solution here. We're doing merch in-house now, as we've been discussing, and Micah and I have been talking about the Resident Evil 4 merchant. You know, like, what you buying? Because she's getting everything kind of settled and figured out or whatever, along with Dustin. So maybe I'll get her that costume. That would be kind of sexy. Sexy Resident Evil 4 merchant.
A sexy version.
I wanted to ask you about this, Chris. GamesBeat reports that Respawn, the story's called Respawn isn't canceling secretive third game after losing director. We reported last week that Mohammed Alavi, longtime Infinity Ward employee and was there from the very beginning at Respawn, is leaving to go to quote unquote his next adventure. This called into question the nature of what was going on with this game, if it wasn't very far along or what they were going to do with it. All they really say in this story, and it says, quote, Respawn has only ever confirmed small tidbits about Alavi's game. It is a third project alongside continuing development of Apex Legends and the sequel to Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order. The studio has also previously said it is a single-player adventure. In addition to those details I've learned, and he's from his perspective, it is a first-person shooter with AAA ambitions, and the design team is striving for mobility and style as guiding principles. The third game, however, is not a sequel to Titanfall 1 or 2. So how do you feel about that? We have a little bit more clarity. You're such a big Titanfall guy. I mean, you were so good at it when I was watching you. At least you have a great skill in that game. You're a great lover of shooters.
Yeah.
What would you expect or want from this single player game?
I mean, if it's a single player game, my immediate assumption for whatever reason is that it's not an FPS. I don't know why. I feel like if EA, because that's Respawn, right? EA is under Respawn.
Yeah, Respawn. It says though that it is an FPS. It says I've learned it is an FPS with AAA ambitions.
That's confusing. I don't know what that would. Because when I think about single player FPSs, I think of like only things that have had, traditional history, things like Doom, Wolfenstein. I can't think of many modern single player FPSs. Like most FPSs now are almost multiplayer only, or they have like a single player component. So I don't know what I expect this to be. I don't know if it's. I feel like it could be whatever. It could be a Star Wars thing. It could be a completely original IP. It could be something that takes place in the Titanfall universe but isn't a sequel, like Callisto is kind of like this thing that takes place in PUBG, even though there's no real reason for it to. I think if they're really going a single player FPS route, I really hope it's something akin to Doom, like something that's very, very frenetic and arcadey. I think that's something that EA hasn't really done with their shooters. I think most of them have been fairly, advanced movement oriented or, boots on the ground, kind of bordering on military sim style. So it would be cool to see them kind of take a swing at the more arcadey style of FPS that's been undergoing a bit of a resurgence lately, thanks to, in no small part, thanks to Wolfenstein and Doom 2016 and several others. So,
what do you think, Dustin? Is there anything you'd like to see from this?
I guess I'm just disappointed that it's not Titanfall overall, but I could understand that brand is basically, I don't know, it feels kind of wrapped up. Like Apex Legends is the now what's left of Titanfall, and so maybe this is their way to start again with a sequel that, well, not a sequel, but something that maybe has some of the familiar qualities we loved, but doesn't have any of the baggage of Titanfall.
Maybe it's a single player Apex game. Could be. I don't know.
Yeah, it's just, I don't know. I feel like they're chasing something maybe like a Doom or a Shadow Warrior, Wolfenstein type thing. To points made, I think that it's a little peculiar that EA seems to kind of have a little bit of whiplash with how it feels about these kinds of games, and have killed perfectly good studios that made great single player games. So it's just a shame that they didn't come around to this sooner. Because in some way, I feel like I like Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order. I think it's really good, but I also feel like I think most people would agree that Respawn is probably best catered towards making multiplayer centric shooters. And now you're making them do this other stuff too. And so it's taking away from this other thing. But by the way, I would say that Apex is so much more important than Battlefield at this point. Battlefield is selling extraordinarily well considering how badly it's being received. But I don't know. It just seems like to be a peculiar use of resources to me. We'll see. That we don't have any details yet to really work off of other than that. This podcast is sponsored by BetterHelp, and Sacred Symbols listeners get 10% off their first month at betterhelp.com/symbols. The word therapy is vague, perhaps intentionally so. That's because therapy can be pretty much whatever you want it to be. We all find therapy in all sorts of activities, with whoever doing whatever. But the act of introspection and honesty with oneself, perhaps a more literal definition of therapy, is more on vogue than ever, and for good reason. By focusing on yourself and what ails your mind and spirit, you can become a better, happier, and more successful version of you, and that's ideal. And since it's the 21st century, those conversations don't need to happen in an office somewhere random, requiring a drive or subway ride, etc., and so on. So it's good that BetterHelp's pioneering brand of therapy fits in perfectly with modern expectations. BetterHelp is customized online therapy that offers video, phone, and even live chat sessions with your therapist, so you don't have to see anyone on camera if you don't want to. This in and of itself is revolutionary, because by utilizing more modern and fluid forms of communication that work best for the individual, predictable barriers to getting to what's most important are removed. You can then begin working earnestly on your most valuable asset, which is obviously you. Whether you lack motivation, suffer from depression or anxiety, are experiencing issues at work or in relationships, and so much more, therapy is a wonderful tool to utilize, and BetterHelp is a great way to begin. Better yet, by going to betterhelp.com/symbols and signing up, you can begin communicating with a therapist in under 48 hours. Millions of people around the world believe in the efficacy of therapy, and you can easily join their ranks. Go to betterhelp.com/symbols. That's BETTERHELP.com/SYMBOLS and get 10% off your first month of sessions. Again, that's betterhelp.com/symbols for 10% off your first month of therapy sessions. I wanted to ask you guys about this. We're kind of coming late to this, but I had to ask about this. Troy Baker, of course, the voice actor Troy Baker, did this NFT tweet. I don't know if it was on other social media as well, but it was very controversial, wherein he says, I'm partnering with Voiceverse NFT to explore ways where together we might bring new tools to new creators to make new things and allow everyone a chance to own and invest in the IPs they create. We all have a story to tell. You can hate or you can create. What it'll be. End quote. And I thought this was fucking stupid. I did DM him. I DM'd him a few times over the last couple of years. He never answers me, but I DM'd him just to say I feel like the way he was being treated was totally unfair and really devoid of grounding. I think people were really taking a lot out on him. That said, I also think that anyone who plays around with NFTs, which I think are demonstrably pyramid schemes that are taking people for a ride, I don't know what else to say. It is troubling to me. I'm wondering, Dustin, let's start with you. What did you feel about this Troy Baker situation that happened about a little less than a week ago when we were recording this?
I think that I don't propose to know any of the details, but I would imagine, my guess is that he was offered a very large sum of cash to do such a thing, and it's easy money to promote something like this. But I think that maybe where some of the pushback, I mean, obviously there's a bunch of pushback against NFTs, but doesn't he does a podcast with Alana Pierce and Mike Bithell and someone else too, right? Where I think that I've not listened to it myself, so I'm just going off what other people have said, but I'm pretty sure they've kind of had an anti-NFT stance. And then so for him to do this is kind of a, bit of a conflict. But overall, I don't know. It's one of those things where he has the ability to promote something and make a bunch of money easily. So good for him, I guess. But how did he not think of the social pushback against this? Like just the amount of was he trending on Twitter that day?
Yeah, he was.
So I don't know. It just seems, I feel like it would have, he didn't really think it through, but maybe this was months ago before the rise of the NFT hate really began that he signed on for this. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe. I found it questionable at best, but again, just a little too vitriolic for my taste. Yeah, what do you think, Chris?
Well, I mean, Voiceverse, which was the company that he was kind of promoting and partnering with, has kind of been outed for stealing things from other, they've stolen work from other entities and kind of repurposed them and tried to sell them. I think there was this one thing recently. If you type in Voiceverse and just on Google and go to news, you'll see that there's a couple stories about them taking, because I think their whole thing is voice NFTs, clips or something. I think that's the idea. I don't fucking understand. But they stole some My Little Pony thing and pitched it up or something, and then just resold it as their own material. So it's understandable why somebody who's kind of partnering with a company that's obviously not above stealing other people's work, that they would be met with a lot of vitriolic, comments, especially given I mean, dude, how do you not know that this is the response that you're going to get? This isn't a new thing. If this was maybe at the beginning of all this, when NFT was new and nobody really understood it, I could maybe see being kind of taken aback by the overwhelmingly negative response. But NFTs have had a bad reputation for a while now, for almost as long as they've been understood or in the public awareness or in the public consciousness. They've had a really bad reputation and nobody's okay with it. Apparently even the podcast that they do isn't okay. So I can't imagine the mindset of shilling this thing and then being surprised, Yeah,
I agree.
That's where I come from.
I totally agree. NFTs are a scam.
Yeah. 100%.
And here's the thing that I want to say about this that I think will encapsulate it well. I think people are sometimes mistaken that new ideas are good ideas. And it's true that many new ideas are good ideas. But you know what I think about? You know those famous reels they would show, and you still see them where, the Wright brothers get the plane off the ground, but they show all of the people who were trying all this wacky shit to try to fly, like the stuff that would just never work. Those were all bad ideas. Chasing after a good idea.
Right.
And none of those ideas make any sense. But one idea did make sense, and it got off the ground, literally. And that is the airplane, right? Like, and we have helicopters and certain other things, gliders, but we don't have like 7,000 forms of air travel because we found the one or two things that work, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
The thing that bothers me most about it is if people treat it because like people have made a lot of money on it, so it's legitimate. And to me, it's just like, just imagine for a moment. These stories have existed for a while now where people are like, oh yeah, I got an Xbox 360 mint condition on eBay for $500. And then they get the empty box because the eBay listing was Xbox 360 box mint condition. You know, somebody was willing to pay $500 for an empty box. That doesn't mean it's like a legitimate thing. That doesn't mean that box is worth $500. Just means you found somebody who just wasn't diligent enough and scammed them. People need to really understand that like value does or the ability to make money doesn't verify a business or doesn't verify a kind of I don't even know how to say these words because it's such a weird. The NFTs are so bizarre.
I think what you're trying to say is that just because there's transaction, like it's transactional and people are making money, doesn't verify that this is a store of value or something that's legitimate or something that's valid. And
it's exactly.
And I think this actually was all encapsulated in this Dune NFT thing, which I think was maybe I don't know if you guys saw this, but one of the funniest things that I've ever seen, which is that these people paid something like almost $3 million for this Dune book that is this interpretation of Dune that was never, I guess, I don't know much about Dune. I read the book when I was a young kid. I didn't understand it very well, but they have this like book that's this like visual version of Dune that could be made into a movie or that was pitched or whatever. And they bought it for like something like 50 times more than it was worth. And then they tweeted out, I'm looking at it now, we won the auction. We're going to make the book public to the extent permitted by law. No, you're not. Number two, you're going to produce an original animated limited series inspired by the book and sell it to a streaming service. You're definitely not going to do that. And number three, support derivative projects from the community. It's not your right to do that because you bought a book. You can't just the article I'm looking at is how this is a case of the NFT brain. And it's true. Like no one even understands how anything works anymore. There are people spending millions of dollars on things they don't even understand what they bought or how they can use it. And the funny thing about this book, by the way, is it is publicly available to everyone. It has been for 10 years in high res scans. It's not the only version of the book. Dune isn't owned by the person who made that book. You can't make a derivative product based on a book you bought. The fuck are these people even talking about? It's getting ridiculous. And so from that perspective, and I think this reinforces what Chris was saying, is how could you not know that this was going to happen? NFTs are not happening. I'm telling you, they're not. Like they're happening literally right now, but long term, this is not going to be a thing. People have not, you can tell there's no acceptance for this. So it just seems like it's sad. I go through these threads sometimes and it's just these people convincing themselves that this works and that's it. And everyone else just being like, what you're saying makes no sense.
Yeah.
Listen, Colin, I went to a GameStop a few years ago. I procured a copy of Death Stranding. And I'm happy to announce Death Stranding 2 from Last Stand Media today, along with derivative anime and related projects. Look forward to it, 2023.
You're gonna make a Death Stranding animated limited series inspired by Death Stranding, and then sell it to a streaming service.
Right. Hopefully, I can sell it to Sony. Honestly,
dude, that is some of that shit from the Spice DAO people is so stupid that I actually don't even believe that I believe that it might be one of those meta things where it's like, oh yeah, we're in on the joke because it's like
we'll see.
But I doubt it. I don't know, man. Anyway, Troy, we wish you well. Maybe respond to me sometime. All right, let's see here. Oh, a couple more pieces of news. Brick Fanatics, which is a Lego site. We don't often go there on this. What is this? A podcast? But they're reporting Lego Uncharted set rumored to include more than 1,000 pieces. And it says, quote, a Lego Uncharted set with the same name as the fourth game is rumored for later this year with over 1,000 pieces as the film's release nears. Instagram user Falcon Brick Studios is reporting that a model based on the Uncharted video game franchise is on the way, potentially giving us another PlayStation set alongside the previously rumored Horizon Zero Dawn build. It's worth noting that the account in question is mostly known for reposting other rumors, but claims to be the source for this one. Be sure to take what you read with an appropriate amount of caution, just in case. So the set will apparently be numbered 76987, and it will be called Uncharted: A Thief's End. It'll be 1,326 pieces, and it'll be a Jeep in a cave. Minifigures of Nathan Drake, Elena Fisher, and Victor Sullivan, Sully will be in there. And that's basically the details. Chris, you seem quite emotive about this. What say you?
Because I just saw the 1,000 pieces and I just thought immediately, like, this Lego set will take you 500 hours to complete.
We'll get to that later.
Which they do. Like, it takes like an insane amount of time to make these things. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, cool. Yeah, it makes sense, I guess, with a movie coming out and just kind of trying to get that cross promotion. Lego to me is confusing though, because they'll just come out with a Seinfeld Lego set in like 2020 and that just makes sense for some reason, and it's just totally fine, even though there's no Seinfeld 2, you know. So the way that Lego incorporates these things are just completely like, if we didn't know that a movie was on the horizon, for example, we would really, this would just be kind of like, oh, interesting. You know, it wouldn't be like an indication of anything. We wouldn't be like, why are they doing a Lego set for Uncharted? Could this mean? You know, it's just, it feels...
Could it mean we're getting Lego Uncharted?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that would be cool.
That would be awesome. Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. Cool. I mean, it's. I like Lego in general.
Me too.
Maybe that's just because of generations of brainwashing and association. But you know,
you guys were more of the age for Lego than me. I mean, Lego has existed since like the 70s, but when I was a kid, there were no licensed Lego sets. That wasn't a thing that was happening. You would go and get, like, they had the castle and the spaceship and all that, and it was super cool. But most people, when I was a kid, Legos were just like a bin of 2,000 pieces that you would build whatever you wanted with, and then sometimes you get these little accoutrements. And by the time it was not until I got older that, and really out of toy space, although I'm clearly not out of toy space as I have like fucking massive G.I. Joe collection in my house now, but when I got out of that space is when Lego started getting cool. And the problem with it was I was still kind of attracted to it. It seemed like it would have been fun for me in my teens and 20s, but it was expensive. It is expensive. And it also requires space. My nephew is super into Lego. They all are, but my nephew Dash is like really, really into it. And they have like a whole room basically in their house just dedicated to this shit. And the funny thing is that he's an Uncharted super fan. I think I told you guys he got the ring. Drake's ring that he wears around his neck.
Yeah.
And so this is perfect for him because he doesn't know yet, but my friend Jay Kanto, who made the Uncharted 4 collection, legacy collection artwork, is he actually did the Last of Us piece behind me. He's a friend of mine. I gave him a commission a long time ago, so we became friends before he became like big for doing this stuff. He's sending me a poster of that for my nephew signed, which is going to be very cool. I'm very excited about that. He doesn't listen to the show. I hope so. All right. I also wanted to ask you guys, or at least just bring up that Storm Reid from Euphoria has been cast in HBO's The Last of Us as Riley. People seem to be happy about that. I don't think there's much more to say about that.
Yeah.
And finally, I wanted to just touch on something. This podcast, not this podcast, but Sacred Symbols Plus has been cited by some people. It's funny, the draft episode we did where we drafted our teams for Metacritic League. And they were talking about how Hogwarts Legacy, how I said, I've heard from sources that Hogwarts Legacy won't come out this year, and that it's in some sort of trouble and that they're going to need more time and that'll end up coming out in 2023. I didn't report this in a main show because it wasn't something I was really reporting. And going back and looking at the context, it only came up because Dustin, you had brought up, as I recall, that like none of us picked Hogwarts Legacy. And I was explaining, I didn't pick it because I've been talking to people saying that it's not going to make it this year. That's fine if people want to report on that. I did say it. I do stand by it, by the way. I actually emailed with the source after this and got some more details. But be wary of how and when and what people are saying that I'm saying and in what context. Because if I have a scoop or something I really want you to know, it's not going to be buried at the end of a Patreon-only exclusive episode. It's not the way I work and operate. I'm not mad at people for reporting it. I want to add more context to it as I can. I've seen since that WB and Avalanche have said that the game is coming out in 2022. I think that might be their intention. But again, talking to my contact, it just seems like there's just a lot to overcome. And a lot of it has to do, apparently, and not surprisingly, with just all of the many levels of people that are involved in a product like this, because it's not just an internal project or anything like that. It's Harry Potter. So just wanted to throw that out there in case people were looking for clarity. Again, no problem with people mining our show for news, but if I wanted that to be more newsworthy, you would have known where the source came from, because a lot of people are like, where did he even say this? And I'm like, literally at the end of Sacred Symbols Plus last week. So anyway, we'll see. I hope that I'm not wrong, because I'm just reporting what someone's telling me, but I hope that is wrong, because I am excited about Hogwarts Legacy, as we noted a couple of episodes of Sacred Symbols Plus ago. It's one of my most anticipated games, actually. Okay, let's get into what we're playing. Dustin, let's begin with you. You are playing Nobody Saves the World on Game Pass.
That is true on Xbox Game Pass. It's my fault that the acquisition happened. I actually really almost played next to nothing this entire week. I've just been kind of I'm in a mode. I don't know if you guys ever feel this way, where I'm so excited for a select few amount of games that are getting pretty dang close that it's almost makes it harder to play other games, because it's kind of hanging out in the back of my mind. And I'm really, like I said earlier, I'm very much into anime right now, watching JoJo. So I've only lightly played some Nobody Saves the World, and I really like so far what I've played. It's very much has that drink box quality. It just has such a distinct art style. And one thing that I love that they've done in their more recent games, particularly Guacamelee 2 and now this, is that they have this really awesome lighting engine on a 2D game that really, really looks nice. It's kind of hard to even describe like lighting on a 2D game with flat characters, but when you see it, you'll know it looks really cool. And the main thing about this game, for people who haven't played it or checked it out, is that you basically you switch your character up. So you play as Nobody, and Nobody is able to transform into different types of characters. So like the first one you get is this little rat character who chomps people, and you can apply curse damage. And to my understanding, where the game gets really interesting is that as you unlock more characters, you can eventually start to mix their abilities. And so there's this meta game of figuring out buffs and debuffs and different environmental situations and mixing up your character's abilities for maximum effectiveness. And yeah, it feels awesome to play so far. Like I said, not a ton of time into it, but it's available currently right now just for PC and Xbox. It's on Game Pass, assuming this will come to PlayStation, I would think this year, but at the very latest next year.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I've been talking to those guys. They were just on Defining Duke, as we had noted, and they're so interesting because they insist on doing new things, which on one hand is frustrating if you're into any of their specific games. You really want them to double and triple down on those games. But on the other hand, and they did do, multiple Mutant Blobs games. They did do multiple Guacamelee games, but I do respect that they are always on to the next thing. And just a great little Ontario, Canada studio, our friends at Drinkbox. Well, I'm looking forward to playing it when it comes to PlayStation. Chris, what are you playing?
Yeah, so I'm still playing the same set of games that I was playing last week, Prey, Fallout New Vegas, and Death's Door. I gotta be real, I haven't played that much this week. I've been a little preoccupied, but I don't know if I have that much more to say on any of these things. I'm having a good time playing them. I played a lot more of Prey, and I'm still adoring Prey. I think it's phenomenal, and I'll just echo what I said last week, where it's just, I can't believe it took me so long to really sink my teeth into this and really appreciate what this game was doing. And I'm just looking forward to playing, especially the Moon Crash DLC, which I've just heard nothing but good things about. And I've heard from like a friend of mine who didn't like Deathloop, mentioned to me that, yeah, Deathloop is just Moon Crash done way worse. So like I'm interested to see how that shakes up. But again, haven't sunk too much time into anything. But I would still recommend all of these. Obviously, Fallout New Vegas is a classic, so you don't need my recommendation for that. But
cool. Yeah, I don't actually have much more to say either because I'm playing the same games. Persona 4 Golden, still working my way through that. I'm in the, what would be like the 6th dungeon, I guess, something like that. And I'm still playing Far Cry 6. I'm getting close to the platinum. I actually played with a listener for a little while online to get the online trophy that I needed and just kind of cleaning that up. Another listener reached out and said that they had an extra season pass from a steelbook they got that they were going to email me, but they never did. Liar.
Ooh.
But I'm waiting because
I
don't even remember the person's name, but I appreciate it. It's a nice sentiment. But their game RP Golf or RPG Golf comes out when this podcast drops the same day. And it's kind of a game like an old school looking 2D role-playing game where it fuses golf and RPGs. And I know it's not the first. There's a couple others that do this as well, but and I'm not sure what to call it, if it's RP Golf or RPG Golf. Very similar to the website RPG Gamer that I used to love when I was a kid.
Oh, yeah,
I didn't know if it was RP Gamer or RPG Gamer, but nonetheless, that game is on the radar, so I'm going to probably pick that up, and I'll have something to say about that next week. The game that is going to surprise everyone that I'm playing, actually, or was playing, is Halo Combat Evolved. I played through the entire thing for the first time since 2003, probably, and I had it's funny because, first of all, it's great. There's major problems with it, but it's through a modern lens. It's actually quite remarkable how important that game is. And I just wrote so many notes as I was playing it about, oh my God, this and oh my God, that. And I can't believe they did this and I can't believe they did that. So I'm excited to talk about that. But that is for Knockback, our retro and nostalgia podcast that I do with my brother, Dagan. And so we'll have a very long and meaty conversation about Halo. Now, I have a confession.
I'm excited to hear that.
Oh, thank you. Some people had wanted, some people were asking, oh, have Chris on it. But the idea of Knockback is to hear from, particularly from Dagan.
Right. Yeah.
So we'll see what he has to say. I have things to say about it as well. But I do have a confession. Like I was saying, I have a confession. And I admitted this on Discord. So if you're one of the 4,000 people on our Discord, which is another Patreon perk, you may already know, but I subscribed to Game Pass to get Halo Combat Evolved. And I was annoyed, as I had noted on a previous episode that we had done, because it was $40. And then I was like, $40 or just get Game Pass for $1 and then cancel it. And I was like, it's just $40 a lot of money for Halo collection. I know that it's a collection of important games, but it's just, come on, man. It came out in 2014, right? So it's just, no, I'm not doing that. But then I get on Game Pass and it's really good and all that. Halo, I play Halo. And then I go and cancel. And I go on my computer and cancel it. And it offers to give me not only cancel it immediately, but give me the $1 back. So I was like, ha! And I actually just joking, it was like, hi, I just did it. You know, to Mike, I was like, I just did it with just not paying anything, basically. And I don't know why they let me do that, because I would have been fine just keeping the $1, give you the $1. And then 36 hours later, they announced that they're going to buy Activision. So I apologize. I think I baited fate.
Yeah, you did it.
And I just want to, mea culpa, as it were. All right, guys. So near the end, when we were recording this, Phil Spencer tweeted the following. I'm going to have Dustin add this to the front of the Activision conversation, so you'll have it as we didn't know this when we were saying this, but you should know it before we're going in. He says, quote, had good calls this week with leaders at Sony. I confirmed our intent to honor all existing agreements upon acquisition of Activision Blizzard and our desire to keep Call of Duty on PlayStation. Sony is an important part of our industry and we value our relationship, end quote. Now, people are already arguing about what that means, but I think it pretty obviously means that maybe Call of Duty is just going to stay every year. So with that in mind, keep that there. Maybe it means Warzone. Maybe it means the old game. I don't think so. We'll see. Yeah. But keep that in mind as we go into this lengthy conversation. Enjoy. All right, my friends. Let's get into the news. Of course, we're going to talk about the Activision news. Now, this might be the longest news thing I ever wrote. There's a lot of information in here. Just everyone sit back for a couple minutes. Let me read this, get all the information out. And then we might not get to all of them, but obviously all you guys wanted to talk about in the thread this week on Patreon. And of course, you can submit your questions over there for the podcast. 90%. First of all, it's the biggest thread I think we ever had. It was like 250 entries, and they were almost all about Activision. So I took maybe 12 or 15 of them. We'll try to get to some of them. I want to note before I begin again that we talked about this for over an hour on Sacred Symbols Plus. That podcast will be live imminently for free subscribers on YouTube, so you can go listen to that. And I will try not to be too redundant about the things I say, because I do have other thoughts that I want to share as well. So here's the piece of news. Number one, in the biggest corporate deal in video game industry history, megacorporation Microsoft, the parent of PlayStation's rival brand Xbox, purchased the world's largest games publisher, Activision, for a record $68.7 billion. This mega deal equals nearly the entire value of mergers and acquisitions industry-wide for all of 2021, and comes on the back not only of Take-Two's purchase of Zynga, but of Microsoft's purchase of ZeniMax and its Bethesda publishing brand, which was finalized last year. This news has completely shaken the industry and has greatly mixed the competitive makeup of gaming. Should the deal go through, and it should, as regulatory issues are expected to be minimal, and Microsoft has even staked a $3 billion kill fee on it happening, meaning Activision has nothing to lose. Microsoft will control some of the biggest brands in gaming, along with the studios that make them. For starters, Call of Duty will now be a first-party Xbox series, as will World of Warcraft, Diablo, Overwatch, and even Candy Crush. But between Activision itself and its mergers with King and Blizzard, they own a lot of other IP too, such as Crash Bandicoot, Spyro and Skylanders, Guitar Hero and DJ Hero, Hearthstone, Heroes of the Storm, Prototype, Geometry Wars, Singularity, King, Police and Space Quest, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater, StarCraft, and more. When it comes to studios, the following teams join Xbox's first-party entities: Beanox, High Moon, Infinity Ward, Raven, Sledgehammer, Toys for Bob, and Treyarch. Naturally, Blizzard's internal teams, including Vicarious Visions, will also be included, as will King's internal teams. The deal is expected to close in fiscal year 2023, and controversial CEO Bobby Kotick, the head of Activision for more than 30 years, will apparently step down once the deal is complete, though he will do so billions of dollars richer. At $90 a share, Microsoft is paying some 40% over market value for Activision and is doing so with one goal in mind: to support Game Pass with as much content as humanly possible and snuff out its competition in the process. The move is perceived to be so devastating to Sony that it lost $20 billion in market value following the news. As publication Bloomberg notes, Sony is far more reliant on PlayStation than Microsoft is on Xbox. Game sales and subscriptions alone make up a third of Sony's total revenue as a corporation. So upping the stakes like this puts Sony in a very difficult position. While the status of what Sony can afford is widely overstated, the corporation could easily acquire whatever it wants with both cash on hand, credit, options, mergers, and more. This move will likely put it on its back foot, and it doesn't want to go down the subscription route, but will likely be forced to. Indeed, that is Xbox's expectation, according to publication IGN. Spencer told the website in part that the Spartacus rumors will prove to be, quote unquote, an inevitability. In other words, he says that they will end up copying Game Pass. In a comment given to the Wall Street Journal, Sony PR said the following, quote, "We expect that Microsoft will abide by contractual agreements and continue to ensure Activision games are multi-platform," end quote, a statement that's both strong and tinged with fear. For its part, Microsoft stated in an SEC Q&A the following in part, quote, "We will honor all existing commitments post-close. As with Microsoft's acquisition of Minecraft, we have no intent to remove any content from platforms where it exists today," end quote. Phil Spencer himself added to that in an interview with Bloomberg, quote, "I'll just say to players out there who are playing Activision Blizzard games on Sony's platform, it's not our intent to pull communities away from that platform, and we remain committed to that," end quote. While there is much reporting around the deal, some of it is conflicting. It seems that Activision's board was openly shopping possibilities behind the scenes, indicating Sony may have been aware of this deal before it was announced. It's also certain Microsoft is taking advantage of a wounded company with a very valuable set of assets. Activision, founded in 1979, was the first games publisher in the world as we know it. In the mid to late 80s, the publisher changed names and nearly went out of business before a man named Bobby Kotick stepped in 1991, saving the publisher with a mere $500,000. In 2008 and 2016, the publisher made its most consequential moves with the acquisition of Blizzard and King, respectively. All right, that's the news. Sorry for the diatribe.
Yeah.
Dustin, let's begin with you this time.
Yeah.
We talked about this extensively. I'm curious, now that you've had time to settle, where's your mind on this?
So I'm trying to, I don't want, like we said, I don't want to repeat the things that we said earlier. So I guess what's been floating around in my head currently is that there's been some of this new comments, particularly this comment from Sony has been floating around in my head this morning. The one where we expect Microsoft will abide by contractual agreements and continue to ensure Activision games are multi-platform. Really interesting statement there. And the thing that I was floating around in my head this morning was that we know that Sony has some kind of deal for Call of Duty where PlayStation is the home of Call of Duty. There's a lot of marketing. The Call of Duty League is through PlayStation, I believe. And I was wondering, when they say contractual agreements, what does that mean? For how long? And I thought, is there a possibility that their deal is for the duration of the PlayStation 5 or something like that? Or is it a year-by-year basis? I don't know. So that was one of the things, just wondering, like, man, maybe Microsoft will be required to release Call of Duty games based on whatever deal they have going on right now. Now, Colin, you mentioned the possibility that maybe there's a way they could buy their way out of that. But I don't know. That's kind of a area where I'm not super knowledgeable on, but I don't know. I've been thinking about some of the brighter aspects of this deal that may not be great for a PlayStation gamers exclusively, but just overall, and that we see Phil Spencer in interviews talking about how he's excited to revive some of Activision's older IP and try to line up these teams doing the things that they're best at. And so the thought of Toys for Bob making another platformer game, maybe a new Banjo-Kazooie game, something like that.
Ooh.
Awesome. Great news to see Vicarious Visions not be tied to doing Blizzard support stuff. That's exciting news overall. And I hope that we see under Xbox's leadership some of those teams that we were so excited about the products they were making just a few years ago that then just got folded into support, be able to do great things again. Obviously, those are going to be exclusive, I think, any of those types of products. But again, that was just some of the silver lining that I was thinking about.
Sorry, I'm writing notes, of course. Chris, where do you want to begin? I mean, what's your feeling on this now that we've had time to settle, that we've gotten some new quotes? There is an interesting piece to this, and Hogue was the one I think that reported this, by, of course, delving into the legalese, which is that I believe Activision will have to accept a higher bid if one comes through. And so there is some speculation, like, could there be some sort of, I don't want to say cabal, but for lack of a better term, some sort of cabal of companies that got together and tried to buy Activision from Microsoft, but then Microsoft would have the right of refusal because they can just bump the price up. So I think that this is just a done deal. I do wonder if companies would try to get together to make it more painful for them. But this is, so there is some interesting stuff here, but I'm wondering what you think now that we have just a lot more information to work on than we did when we last spoke.
Yeah, I mean, I think when we talked about it in the Plus episode, I think I touched on some of the positives about, potentially revivals of old, studios and franchises that have been kind of dormant under Activision. My position with this was always that, like, I think you're going to see a much better Activision out of this, a far more interesting Activision, because there's kind of every reason for them to delve into what they own, as opposed to when it was just them before and Call of Duty was their cash cow and they had more reason to focus on that. I think that was inherently a less interesting situation for them. I think that was inherently a less interesting space for them to exist. So I always thought that this would be this deal would lead to a far more interesting Activision. But I am still kind of the mind where, I'm happy about that, but it does feel it just feels a bit oversteppy. And it's not, again, I use the word, it feels monopolistic in the Plus, and a lot of people are like, it's not a monopoly. It's like, I understand that. I understand it's not literally a monopoly. I think the main reason that this is going to go through without legal consequence is because I feel like Microsoft can just be like, look at Disney. Disney owns way higher of a percentage of the film market than Xbox does the games market, even with the purchase of Activision. So there's no real case to be made against Microsoft as far as like a genuine monopoly. It just feels like Disney. And even if Disney isn't a straight up monopoly, you can't deny that it feels kind of uncomfortable to know that so many things fall under the Disney umbrella. And you see, The Simpsons just on Disney Plus being masqueraded around like a shameless husk of what it used to be. And it's just the saddest sight you've ever seen. And nobody wants to see that happening in games. Granted, Microsoft hasn't really done that yet. They haven't really had a lot of time to really show what they're going to do, even with the Bethesda deal. There were so many things that were under. I mean, we're still a while away from Ghostwire coming out, and that was pre-deal. So we're still years away from seeing what Microsoft is going to do with this acquisition. We're still a ways off from seeing what an acquired publisher's output looks like from them proper. But I would say that some of the concern and consternation isn't necessarily unfounded, even if it might be a little speculative. And that's it.
Matthew Urso wrote into us kind of on this point. He says, "Hi, Slitterheads." And he went with that hard R, by the way. Well, Xbox has done it again. With their purchase of Activision Blizzard with the purchase of Activision Blizzard there has been an immense amount of talk within the industry about this move and endless opinions of the pros and cons of the matter. I just wanted to weigh in and say that though I only really play Overwatch, this move feels like a bridge too far. It just doesn't sit right with me, and the reactions online have been predictable and just as disconcerting. From the pleasure some people are taking in watching Sony fans squirm to the Sony fanboys who wrongly think Sony must now acquire someone like Square Enix, it all just feels wrong. Regardless, this is a massive blow to Sony. So to end, I ask you boys this. Where does the industry go next? And he asks also what's going next for Xbox. We'll get into all that. What's next for Sony? But Matthew, thank you for writing in. I wanted to say that it's what Chris had said, and it's something that a lot of the audience seems to share in the array of letters that we got, which is that people feel like what I had said about the Bethesda deal is true, that when Microsoft steps over the line with their next deal, it's going to hurt them a little bit. And I don't think that it's not going to be Pyrrhic. I don't think the hurt overwhelms the benefit in any way. But I think that this is a pretty common theme. And people I'm talking to behind the scenes, some people feel the same way. It changes everything. And that's really my takeaway from it, as I've had a few days to kind of marinate, is I just don't like what it means. I don't like the trends. I don't like that it's going to cause consolidation or further consolidation, that this is a self-fulfilling prophecy. And I'm especially sad because I think that Sony will inevitably make a move to buy something if it's not already in the works. And I just don't think that that is the right way to build a cohesive first party. And I'm just kind of, I don't know, it's kind of like a crestfallen feeling because, as I said on Sacred Symbols Plus, in my Neo analogy, where I keep saying I dodge bullets with these Microsoft deals because I just don't play these games, that doesn't mean that it doesn't have ramifications for all of us nonetheless. And I still feel like there's a lot of myopia with the way some people are analyzing this just as fans of a brand or fans of a game, and rather not looking at it as how it affects all of us. And I don't begrudge Microsoft their ability to wave their money around and their large corporate dick around and do whatever it is they need to do. But it doesn't mean that it's the right thing to do. It doesn't mean that it's the effective thing to do or the good thing to do for creativity. And I'm glad, Chris, that you brought up Disney, because I think Disney is, it's puzzling, right? Why I look at Disney and I'm like, what is this anymore? Disney, when I was a kid, had some sort of feel and like you understood it. Now it's just this amalgamation of brands, and the only thing that is behind the drywall are dollar signs, and they don't even make sense together, and it's all just made to build this snowball that grows bigger and bigger and gobbles up as much as it possibly can to fulfill the bottom line. And it's similar to what I said about the act of flying, right? Some people are like, well, Activision approached Microsoft, and it's like, so what? Companies approach other companies to sell all the time. That's meaningless. What's meaningful is why a company wants to take things away from others, even if they say that they don't, because I think that they do. And this false equivalence that's built between the way Nintendo or Sony has been doing business for most of their existence and the way Microsoft has done business for its existence just belies a total lack of understanding of the industry by people that say it, that don't really understand how Sony built their first party and don't understand how Microsoft built theirs. I'm seeing really random shit where it's like, this is exactly what Sony did in the 90s. Like, what? I'm one of the foremost experts on this brand that I know of, and I don't know what the fuck you're talking about. Like, I have no idea what you're talking about. They bought Psygnosis in 1993. You know, they bought Naughty Dog and Sucker Punch, studios that they worked with for a long period of time. They more recently, I saw people trying to compare it to Insomniac. Like, what? Sony's never made a deal worth $1 billion, nonetheless. 6 billion or 70 billion. These are, so it's not a matter of begrudging Microsoft's ability to do these things. They make big deals. They bought LinkedIn for $25 billion. But it's to say that the mergers and acquisitions trend is going to have a deleterious effect on creativity. And ultimately a deleterious effect, I think, on choice. Because I think what we're seeing, as much as we love the different streaming services and we each have our own combination of them, I feel like a lot of this stuff is actually spread out and that the value of these streaming services is lessening because there are too many requirements for you to be too many places now. And this is beginning to set that seed in the industry when we really kind of avoided this. And it's fine because I think the market will speak and the market wants subscriptions, and that's great. But I just find that the analysis of the deal is just not adversarial or skeptical enough. And I'm concerned about that because I don't know why everyone hated Activision last week. Everyone.
Right.
Everyone hated Activision last week. Everyone hated Call of Duty last week. Now, I'm not saying that Call of Duty isn't played and that Activision is a huge company, but you know what I mean. You definitely know what I mean, you listening to this. And now suddenly, just because they're part of a bigger conglomerate, they're now the darlings of the ball. It's just very weird. There's a lot of weird stuff going on here. And I think a lot of it is led by just no one tunes into Sacred Symbols and expects to hear, sunshine and ponies and rainbows for PlayStation and Sony. That's not the way it goes on this show. Anyone who tells you that we're fanboys on the show, don't listen to it.
Yeah.
Period.
For sure.
And so I feel like I'm not seeing anything like that for this deal from the Microsoft side. And it's bothersome because it's not about PlayStation fandom or Xbox fandom or Nintendo fandom. It's about what it means for all of us. And I kind of want to shake people and be and be like, it means something more than just you getting Call of Duty on Game Pass. It means more than that, and that's a concern. Yeah. Anyway, Chris, I keep talking. What do you have to say?
No. I don't know. I feel conflicted about the deleterious effect on creativity, only because in this circumstance it feels like Activision and a lot of these other publishers too. I would say that about EA, especially back in the late 2010s when they were just shuttering studios and kind of folding things under. And I know Activision recently folding great studios that have had great output under the kind of Call of Duty support kind of pillar, where I think you're right overall. But at the same time, part of me is like, I feel like Activision and their IP are probably a lot more free now, in the sense that I don't know if it's necessarily a deleterious effect on creativity in this specific sense, only because I feel like there are a lot of, Vicarious Visions and these other studios that have been kind of folded under that pillar now maybe don't have to be. And maybe they can actually do what they want to do. And maybe Microsoft is going to allow that because they just need shit to pump out on the Game Pass. And that might be a cynical reason for that to happen. But at the same time, that is more out of Activision than we would otherwise probably see.
Yeah, but how would, to just push back on that a little bit, like how would that be? Because I see people making that argument and I understand the premise, but if you're buying the whole vertical, then you need those teams to support the games. They're all built to support and make the games you're buying. That's why I don't understand what people are saying, where they're going to do this and they're going to do that. No doubt. They're
Well,
going to
we don't know
liberate
what they're
something
going
like
to do.
they'll liberate prototype and give it to a studio, or they'll give like Singularity to it or something. It'll be really cool. But I think most of that is wishful thinking, because I think that those studios all make Call of Duty, and in 5 years, all of those studios are going to make Call of Duty. And I think, you're buying Call of Duty, you know?
Maybe. I'm not. Again, this is all speculative,
of course,
because we have no idea, and it's going to be a few years before we even see the beginnings of the effects of any of this, as is the case with Bethesda still. But I don't know. I think I don't know. I just don't think we would have seen. Like, there's no doubt in my mind that Xbox is going to want to leverage shit like Spyro and Crash Bandicoot. You know what I mean? Like, there's no way that they wouldn't, because those are, not only does that fulfill a niche in their first party that they don't have, but it bolsters Game Pass, and it's something that Activision has clearly not given a shit about. Like, they made Crash 4, they did CTR and pumped it full of microtransactions and abandoned it, and then they folded those studios under the corporate kind of umbrella of, hey, get Call of Duty on track. And that's not to say that won't necessarily still be the case, but I don't know. I think there are positives here. It is a very cynical and sad thing that this is what had to. I think the saddest thing about this is that something like this is the only avenue by which we get shit like Crash. You know, that's what the depressing thing is to me, is that it would take this massive multi-billion-dollar corporation just buying everything just to get the shit that we all know would do well, but publishers just can't accept. I don't know. It's very bizarre. But
well, let's continue to explore the topic with a bunch of more questions we have from the audience. Robbie Devers wrote in and said, "Hello, three wise men. How long until we see Spyro and Tony Hawk join Master Chief in some metaverse co-op orgy of awful crossover? Will we now have access to Bobby Kotick skins as NFTs we can carry from game to game? Why the fuck are so many games media celebrating this acquisition?" Dustin, I'm curious what your take is on that question. There is a marked celebratory tone about this. And I'll just remind everyone again that it doesn't make any sense because everyone hated Activision. And again, you know what I mean, last week. And
right.
I find the corporate cheerleading stuff to be so untoward. And again, people can say we're fanboys, but I mean, show me, I guess, because I don't know what you're talking about. And I said with the Bethesda follow-up that I really liked how Sony responded to that, if it was even considered a response, which is like, we're just going to continue to thoughtfully buy teams that make sense for us. And that's what makes the big difference. And I think why the difference between these two companies are so marked in this way, which is like Sony buys Housemarque after just working with them for years. Sony buys Insomniac after working with them for years. Sony buys Firesprite after working with them for years, and so on and so forth. I think Bluepoint is another example. I think the only studio we were surprised by was Nix's, and that was to fulfill a specific need for ports to do the exact opposite, indeed, of what is being done, which is to make games more accessible to other people. So I find the celebratory nature of this, and again, the lack of adversarial coverage, to be really peculiar. And I'm so skeptical of a lot of the Xbox space, not in the fan base, but the way a lot of people are covering it, because it's just way too effusive and it's not asking difficult questions. It's not posing the unintended consequences. And again, don't look at it through a PlayStation point of view per se, but through an industry perspective. There's nothing that's happened in games that will have as much of an effect on the industry as this. This is an inflection point, the likes of Nintendo betraying Sony, and stuff like that. Yeah. And what I mean by that is it just creates this whole new thing that would have existed otherwise. In that case, it was PlayStation. In this case, it's maybe a subscription service. And some people would really talk about the inevitability and all of this. And all I'll say about the inevitability is that I'm glad it's Microsoft and not some other companies. No doubt about that. But I wish I lived in a world where we were really hesitant to allow companies to even get that big, nonetheless, gobble up everything around it. Anyway, I'm talking a lot. Why are so many people celebrating?
So just to be specific, let's talk about games media celebrating this. And obviously we've done our fair share of shitting on games media, and I'm about to right now. A lot of the tone, the West Coast tone, games industry, whatever, claims to be anti-corporate, anti-capitalism, will gladly shit on whatever company that makes them look the best in that moment on Twitter, whatever. But at the same time, cheer on literally every Disney, Star Wars, Marvel property thing ever, while at the same time, they are definitely not guilt-free as far as many, many different issues, whether it be labor-related, virtual effects related labor disputes, or the way that shit went down with filming Mulan in China. Yeah, definitely just as guilty as many of these other companies, of course. So as far as the praising, I don't know, Colin, I'm really curious what you think about this theory. Is that PlayStation over the last, since really the rise of the PS4 early days, is pretty walled off from a lot of people in the industry. They are hard to reach. They are hard to make PR contacts with. They very selective about their interviews. As we've talked about their Wired interviews, they don't go to the games industry. They go to Wired. And they're just kind of, I've always felt from my previous time outside of Last Stand with Sony is that they are very, we'll call you when we need you.
Oh, definitely.
And Xbox is the complete opposite. They hand out shit left and right to people in the games industry. So am I saying that the games industry is compromised because Xbox gives them shit? Not necessarily, but I think that this is an angle to it for sure, is that Xbox is open and much more friendly with the industry itself than Sony is. And so does that have a subconscious effect? I don't know, but I want to throw it out there.
No, I think it definitely does. So we've talked a lot about that. I mean, one of the reasons why I'm so confident in saying whatever it is I want to say on the show and knowing that it comes from the heart is because we don't deal with gaming PR. I want to repeat that for people that are just tuning in or don't know that. We don't have a relationship with Sony. We don't get anything for free. We buy all of our games. And while people send us codes once in a while, usually friends that we know of, and it's usually A or indie games, we haven't said a word to Sony in any capacity in like more than 2 years at this point. And we don't have a relationship with Microsoft, and we don't have a relationship with the third parties, and we don't ask them for codes, and we don't ask them for access. We are totally outside. 100%. And I'm really proud of that because I feel like it allows us to shoot straight. And I think on the other hand, I think you're right. Microsoft has been really aggressive since the early Xbox One era in being around people and in putting their stuff forward. They're great at it. They're really great at it. I remember when we started Kind of Funny, we were obviously known for PlayStation coverage, but they were like, oh, we want to get in with you guys. And they sent us Xboxes, and they gave us interview opportunities, and they invited us to events and stuff. And you're right, Sony doesn't do that. And I don't know what Sony's intent is. Does Sony need us at this show? Absolutely not. But we are the biggest PlayStation podcast, and they don't want to work with us. Or they choose not to. And we don't really care because I think, again, that makes the show better. So I'm not trying to use that as a crutch or an excuse. I don't want to put that out there. But I did want to say that because I think it just gives a little bit of clarity as to maybe why the show sounds a little different than others, because we don't even have to worry about the specter of that. That doesn't even exist in the back of our mind because it would make no sense. And so are people afraid of losing their access? I don't know if that's true. I don't know that Microsoft is that. I've never heard Microsoft being petty. There are companies that are petty, and Microsoft I've not heard is one of them. But I do think it is exciting to feel like you're on the ground floor for something, or that you're being treated well by an industry mover and shaker, and that they're answering your emails and all of this. And I am, again, I just question the point of a press that tells you just to buy everything, that tells you everything is good. And it's bullshit.
Mm-hmm.
It's total bullshit. I'm not going to play that game of And the audience certainly is too smart for that. That's why I'm even confused about who they're speaking to when they say some of this shit. I just want to see some of the acceptance of the downside of these conglomerates forming, and it bothers me because I don't understand when people became corporate cheerleaders. It just seems so foreign to me. And I thought we were all just kind of better than that. And that was kind of part of what was so interesting about covering games, was it didn't seem so commercial. And so there's something a little different, and this brings a little bit of a different feel, and I'm disappointed in that. All right, let's see. Miguel Rosales wrote in, said, hello, CDC. With Xbox's acquisition of Activision Blizzard King, do you foresee they use this as a bargaining chip to pressure PlayStation into accepting Xbox Game Pass on the PlayStation ecosystem? So I've long said that I think Game Pass will be on PlayStation. I still feel like that is the intention. I feel like you can even interpret some of what Phil Spencer says as an indication of that. And so I'm reading like stories that from websites that are saying this like it's a new idea. No, it's not a new idea. However, I think it means it's more likely than ever. Chris, do you agree that this might affect the availability of Games Pass? And I wonder, let me even pitch you to this, is that with those games going on Games Pass, presumably, or Game Pass, presumably, it would be interesting if Microsoft could have some sort of leverage to see, like, not only do we want Game Pass on PlayStation, but we expect access to your games on our platform as well. They have some sort of massive leverage to say, like, it's not just about making our games available for you now. You need us now. And so maybe if Spartacus becomes a thing, we can have some sort of reciprocity in the future. I feel like people need to look at things from the above and below and realize that Sony is not in a powerful position to withstand certain demands like that. What do you think?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's an interesting proposition. I just can't, like, my head doesn't, I can't process how Xbox Game Pass would function on a PlayStation. Like, it would have to be such a strangely, like, because like you said earlier in the episode, Sony makes so much money off of software sales. And so to just have this thing on their platform that just lets people bypass that, along with giving money to their competitor, and maybe they take a cut, but I don't know, like a cut of a subscription versus, you know, what is traditionally a third of their revenue. Unless it was some sort of thing that's like, hey, I could see maybe a first party version or something like that. Like maybe, hey, you could get Halo and whatever on PlayStation, but like Sony has to take a cut of that or whatever, and it would be this version of Game Pass. But then
it's not
that's
Game
a
Pass
whole
then,
nother.
though. In
Yeah,
my
that's
opinion,
kind of the
it's
thing.
not
It's like
even
the
same. But
yeah, man, it's so hard for me to process that I cannot imagine, especially now when we know that smart TVs are going to, I know they're like, Microsoft is pushing to get Xbox Game Pass on smart TVs. Like that's a thing that's happening. And I think they're working on some kind of dongle, like Amazon Fire Stick thing, that might kind of bypass or turn any TV or monitor into a smart TV so that you can use Game Pass through it. And if that's the case, then they won't even necessarily need the, you know, PlayStation's access in the sense of, oh, there's so many PlayStations out in the wild. And it's like, yeah, but they're all, every single thing's on a TV. You know, we have TVs. You know, I just wonder how much leverage Sony would even have in bargaining for the version of Game Pass on their platform that would make the most sense without just straight up crippling their business model in the process. And that's something that that's a big wall that I cannot see over personally. Maybe I'm not creative enough or business minded enough, but it's so hard to imagine.
Well, this is why I think the pincer that Sony is in now with Microsoft is tough, because here's the irony, right? Sony, as I said, Sony software plus subscription is a third of Sony's revenue. right? So that's PlayStation Plus, PlayStation Now, a little bit less, obviously. And then all of the third-party rips from games, 30% at a time.
And microtransactions.
Right, exactly. What's funny about this, to me, is that even if Call of Duty remained an a la carte option for $60 or $70 on PlayStation 5, Sony's 30% gives Microsoft 70% every time a game is sold. Meaning, so you take 7 and put 3 in a bucket, and then you put 7 and 3 in a bucket, and 7 and 3 and 7 and 3 and 7 and 3 and 7 and 3. And before you know it, you have this barrel of money. And no matter how good Sony does on their end, it will never equal anything close to what Microsoft got out of it. That is the perfect pincer. And Dustin, why I think that Sony needs to be open about what I have, again, long said, which is that Game Pass will be on PlayStation. I just think that was always inevitable. And I think, I'm sorry?
What do you mean, though? Do you mean,
as I've said many times,
as we know it in 2021 on PlayStation?
What? No, I don't think it's going to happen in 2021 on PlayStation.
No, I mean, our current, let's say PlayStation or let's say Game Pass as it exists right now, all of Xbox first party and a bunch of third party shit.
No, I don't think that's going to happen. It's as I've said, I think, and I'll reiterate for people that don't remember, is I think that there'll be a somewhat what we've already discussed, which is a catered first and second party Xbox Game Pass. The thing is that will include Call of Duty. I mean, that would conceivably include those kinds of things. It's just a difficult, we're going to talk about it later, but it can't be understated how devastating it's going to be for Sony to lose those sales. And that if they don't lose those sales and the games remain on there, it will never matter how well they do on PlayStation because Microsoft wins. They win. And the more they sell, the more they win. It's a fucked up situation. So I mean, I don't know if that clarifies anything.
I have a hard time saying that a first and second party only service is qualified the same as Game Pass. Like it's so different at that point that do you charge the same amount since it's would be a way smaller selection of titles on PlayStation? And the other thing to consider too is just the Herculean task of porting enough back catalog to make the service available on PlayStation as well would be insane. Just the level of port work that would need to be done to even get this going first, which I mean, Microsoft has the money to do it. So I'm sure that could be a possibility, but I think that's the only way possible is that if it is the first and second party version, like you said, and even then I just don't, the porting is the thing that kind of, unless there's,
I think it would all be in xCloud and stuff. I think you're putting up all these barriers that don't exist. I think the big barrier is just the one at the top, which is, would they actually do it? You know, it's not about all this other stuff. It's just a matter of if they want to do it or not. You know, and it's Microsoft will make anything work. I'm telling you that their goal of conquest is to get this thing on PlayStation, and I've said for 2 years that it's going to happen, and I'm more confident now than I was last week that it's going to happen. And what that looks like and how it happens, I have no idea. And maybe Spartacus totally changes, and when we know what Spartacus is, maybe I'll look now and say, well, that doesn't make any sense anymore. But I always think it's going to make sense for Microsoft to have. You don't think Microsoft would go through the work, Dustin, to make a boutique version of Game Pass for PlayStation? I think that they would jump through every hoop in the world to make that happen. So I don't.
Do you think that they would? Do you think that they would be like, hey, you have PlayStation 1 through PlayStation 3 games back compat on Spartacus? We want some of that.
That's what I'm saying. Like, I think that it can be more I think it opens the idea of this transactional relationship between Microsoft and Sony. We don't really know how it works, but that's what I was saying earlier was, couldn't they just say like, yeah, you can have Call of Duty. We'll just leave Call of Duty on the console. Are you open to giving us anything? You know, like, because we're being, it's a wink and a nod sort of thing. And that's the way business works. And a lot of people do expect that the purchase was done to be cutthroat. So I don't know. It's just, we're just bandying things. It's the third time I've used that word. Things around because we don't really have anything else to work with other than just a scant amount of quotes. And
it should be noted that this is such a unprecedented time that it's very difficult to not only with the dawn of subscription services and kind of like the encroaching nature of Xbox Game Pass, something that is unlike anything we've seen before, but also on top of these two major acquisitions, if we want to even go back to the Bethesda thing, it's a very unpredictable time to look at the industry. And it could very well be possible that there's some version of Game Pass on PlayStation. You know, I think even just a week ago, we would have been like, you know, you think Microsoft is going to buy Activision? You know, like that would have been an insane thing to say a week or 2 weeks ago. But it's real now. So honestly, like I'm of the mind of never say never. It's just I have a hard time imagining what that PlayStation version of Xbox Game Pass would look like, unless it's some weird kind of almost like a fusion of Spartacus and Game Pass, and this kind of weird thing where there's almost a transactional nature to the service as it exists on that platform itself. But then the best version of Game Pass would still be on Xbox. So it's a weird situation, but it's interesting. This is a very fascinating thing to look at.
I agree. What I think is interesting about it too is Microsoft has shown this random willingness in the past to want to work with others, sometimes with success and sometimes not. Of course, famously, They put Halo on Nintendo DS and never sold it, but it was done and we had it at IGN. So that was an interesting thing that they did back then. And then, of course, I reported, although a lot of people don't want to believe it, but it definitely happened, which was that Microsoft was considering and talking preliminarily about bringing Master Chief Collection to PS4 back in the day as a promotion for, you know, the Halo franchise and what they were doing. So they play with outside of the box ideas in such a way that I think Sony would never conceivably think of. And that's why I'm afraid of Sony being on the back foot as a fan of PlayStation as a brand, because I don't think that they're well prepared to hit back. And with the purchase of Activision, it puts everything on the table. Activision was the biggest and most expensive possible target. So now everything is for sale. And it makes me feel like I want to reiterate, just for newcomers or people that need to hear it again, is that my sincere hope is that Sony does not respond with a purchase, but rather just invests money in individual studios, IP licenses that make sense for them. But I don't like that this is probably going to push them in a situation where they are going to go take something away now from Microsoft. And I think that sucks. And that's why I never wanted this ball to be pushed down the hill. Was just, It was inevitable that the only inevitable thing is that short-term gains will always be taken no matter what long-term ramifications might exist. And that, I think, is the biggest shame of all. So we're going to see a Sony that does things that I'm going to hate probably. And that's going to bum me out. But I also think the other thing I wanted to point out is we have to be available. Our minds need to be available for this idea that Sony gets bought. And I think that Sony getting bought is a distinct possibility. I think a lot of people point out that, and I think rightfully so, that Sony is a major multinational corporation, but would be very easy for someone like Amazon, Apple, Microsoft itself to buy it if it was for sale and they wanted to sell. And so that's another interesting thing that we have to consider, is like there's this talk about, well, Microsoft was the best suitor to protect what Activision is, right? And it stopped Tencent or NetEase from buying them or someone else. And that's true. And I would much prefer their Microsoft over them. But we have to maybe ask the question too of like, what would be the best parent for Sony? Because in this era of mergers and acquisitions, I guarantee you the PlayStation brand, which will always exist, always, would be mighty tantalizing to Netflix, mighty tantalizing to Apple, mighty tantalizing to Amazon. I mean, you want to talk about a company that makes a lot of sense, it would probably be Amazon. Amazon has tried and failed so many times to do something with video games, with the rare exception of like something like New World, that they would be like, yeah, all right, well, and hey, free shipping for Prime for all PlayStation games, and you get $10 on PSN every month. Then I don't know. I wanted to just throw that out there for people to consider as well.
The Amazon angle is really interesting because you have to think about the assets of the Sony, the electronic maker, as well, just because Amazon has dipped their toes in that. There's like Amazon TV or something.
Right, exactly. And that could become their brand. Like Sony could become they wouldn't change the name Sony. Maybe they would become I don't want that to happen. I think that would fucking suck. I want to be really clear, by the way. Anything that I'm talking about right now, I don't want that to happen. Like, just straight. I've said before, what I would want would just be for Sony to say, like, yes, we are going to invest billions in studios that we're going to make. And maybe we'll go and buy one or two, and maybe we'll revive one or two IPs, but let's keep the culture. Yeah, anyway, Dustin, you have something to say?
What do you think about the idea of mergers? Because I think that also is a likely possibility, particularly in that I think of the story of Xbox trying to buy Nintendo many years ago. And it was, even though they had the money to do so, Nintendo was like, no, we're not doing that. And I wonder if there's some kind of cultural Japanese aspect to this where Sony's like, okay, let's merge with other Japanese companies in order to keep our identity as the company that we are.
Yeah, it's possible. I think, unfortunately for them, they haven't done a really great job of holding on to their Japanese heritage. You know, and that's,
well, they might have to try to. That's like, yeah.
But it's because like we're happening with like the Japan studio kind of going away and all of this. But it is interesting, this idea, of there being like some sort of syndicate basically in which the likes of Square Enix, Capcom, Konami, and a couple others were like, let's just go with Sony. But I don't want that to happen either, because that takes all that shit away from others. I'll just reiterate that I appreciate Phil Spencer's stance on stuff like Minecraft and all of that, but I also think he speaks through both sides of his mouth, because he'd be like, well, a game with heritage will never take Minecraft away. But then they put Minecraft Dungeons on PlayStation 4, and it's like, okay, Minecraft Dungeons didn't have to be on PlayStation 4. So are you guys also going to put Starfield, you know, just as an example, Starfield on PlayStation as well? And they're like, well, why would we put Starfield on Xbox on there? We bought Bethesda. And I'm like, but why did you put Minecraft Dungeon on there? So I don't know what the rules are, you know, and I'm afraid of Sony making any acquisition that puts other players in that position. I don't want a scenario where Xbox players wake up to the news that we woke up to as PlayStation players, wherein we might lose access to a bunch of games. I would much rather Sony say, let's be proactive and create new assets. As I think I used the reference, like go into the mine shaft and bring all of the raw ore out. There's infinite amounts of it. You just got to go get it. You don't need to go buy it on the market. And that's what Microsoft does. And that's part of why I feel like Microsoft or Xbox is just, as a brand, is a little bit hollow compared to PlayStation because of moves like this. I don't know how anyone can kind of look at it otherwise. It's not the same. Sony buying Psygnosis in 1993 for like $50 million is not the same. Sorry.
I saw a lot of arguments about, Sony gates off stuff all the time, like Final Fantasy 16, Final Fantasy 7 Remake. And it's like, yeah, like I don't like timed exclusives either. We understand why they exist.
Yeah.
And the business reasons, especially like Final Fantasy, you have to imagine that Final Fantasy 15 outsold on PlayStation many, many times over the Xbox version. And so when Sony comes knocking on Square Enix's door and says, hey, we're going to give you a bunch of money just to not release it on Xbox at first. Well, why not? Like, and again, I'm not cheering on the fact that Xbox gamers won't be able to play Final Fantasy 16 at launch, but it's just like, it makes sense. And it's a very different scenario than permanently buying a company.
The Final Fantasy 7 remake one in particular is very bizarre because there's just like no indication that that's.
Yeah. The deal has been reworked and they just won't say it. I don't know why, you know?
Yeah.
It's very bizarre.
Because I just don't want Nintendo and Xbox people or whatever to wake up and be like, oh, we just lost something. What I would rather be is Sony saying, here's what you're going to gain. All that other stuff remains, but here's what you're going to gain. And I agree. I think it's a great point about the third-party exclusives. Like, people often strawman PlayStation fans or us on the show, and certainly a lot of people listening to it being like, well, this happens and this happens. And I'm like, just because Sony does something doesn't mean we support it. I often say that third-party exclusives make the most sense, and that I was surprised by the conventional wisdom indicating that they would go away because they are the least risky endeavor for all parties. They spread the value of the game, how much it's going to cost, and then they spread the wealth when it's done. And so there's just way less risk and way less reward. And I understand why Sony does that. I don't necessarily think that's good, because what would I have rather seen, like Legend of Dragoon 2 or something? Probably, yeah. I think, and that's the point I'm trying to make, is that maybe this is unrealistic, but maybe PlayStation fights back by saying we're just going to double down on quality and what we do. Like we make better games. And I don't think anyone can deny that. That's undeniable. And so maybe that's an ace in the hole, but I doubt it. I think Microsoft's being just so aggressive and again, changing the nature of expectations here. But I wanted to get to Jeffrey Sutton's question here. He says, hey, CDC, how much does the Activision acquisition affect physical media outlets? Since Call of Duty, the biggest selling game just about every year, is seemingly going to eventually be free, in quotes, every year on Game Pass, I fail to see how this won't have a huge impact on GameStop and other outlets moving forward. Jeffrey writes in, this is a wonderful point and something that I'm not seeing talked about very much. Justin, you're nodding in agreement. I feel like this is one of those, I agree. I think this is one of those moves where I think Microsoft is ready to say, like, we often said, even back at IGN, that there would be a time when the companies were comfortable to finally say, we don't need you anymore. And maybe Microsoft is finally ready to say that in 2022. What do you think, Dustin?
Yeah, it's so crazy. I didn't even think about the aspect of I think last episode we were talking about the Call of Duty like Christmas sales, that there's probably just so many people that get a physical copy of that, and that's just totally gone. And I mean, the thing about Xbox in general, at least for my Series X, like I've put a disc in that thing 2 or 3 times now, and they were all backwards compatibility games. I don't own a single new Series X game just because of Game Pass. So yeah, in a time where GameStop is already struggling to survive, they got the next generation boost, which I think kind of let them sail along a little bit longer. But you have to imagine, Colin, that this is a huge step when you take the biggest selling game ever, and now those physical copies, they don't even really, I'm sure they'll still exist for a time, but I don't know who's going out and buying it when you can sign up for $10 or $15 a month, depending on which service you want.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how much they actually raise the price. It was noted that Netflix has raised the price 6 times in 8 years, so we'll see.
It's like $20 now.
Yeah, which is kind of getting questionable now, I think.
Yeah.
I have Netflix just because I think I've said this many times, but I've been a member for like 20 years consistently, and it just seems wrong now to shut it off. But I am to the point that's being made here. I think it's really interesting, Jeffrey, and I also think, as I said on Sacred Symbols Plus, I think another aspect of this is kind of this move that Xbox is making and has been making for years now with Game Pass is a volley against just people that like physical games. They don't care about you. They don't want you to exist. You're part of what's stopping this from happening. So I think that although it is mostly meaningless, this might reinforce the physical games people on PlayStation and Nintendo. But I think that that's not really a group of people you care about. No offense. When digital sales are just going up and up and up and up, and Microsoft wants to make it basically all digital. And of course, that's what they want. All right. Gary Huss wrote in and said, hey, CDC, just listen to Sacred Symbols Plus on the Microsoft Activision business. And when Colin asked the question of what Sony should or will do to respond, I thought the answers were kind of tepid. Now that you all have had the time to marinate on the gravity of what happened, what do you think now? I think Sony should go fucking scorched earth and ensure no big Japanese game ever sees the light of day on Xbox. I know that sucks, but Microsoft has started a fucking war of survival. If they're willing to spend that much money at the drop of a hat, no company is safe. Sony needs to assume they're going to buy up everything. Man, I wanted to just read this because I think this is the way so many people feel. I want to just urge caution. I just want to say that again. Be careful what you ask for. Maybe it's inevitable, and maybe it's happening and before our very eyes. But I think that would suck if Sony did that to Microsoft. But maybe you're right. Maybe Microsoft put Sony in that position. I don't know. When this inevitably happens, guys, and Sony buys Square Enix or something like that, we're going to have the conversation about it. And I'll try to put a happy face on it, but it's just going to reinforce my worst instincts about what's happening. And I don't know, man. I don't know. I want to just read that, Gary, because I know a lot of you feel that way, but try to check that. All right. Let's see what else is here. I wanted to read this from Chelsea Farmer. She said, hey, CDC, is there any hope for gamers being able to develop critical consciousness? My first thought when reading the APK acquisition yesterday was this is bad for the industry and is another step towards Microsoft cornering the market and shifting gaming towards a digital subscription-based model. I expected to see more pushback from not only journalists, but also podcasters who constantly feign that they are anti-corporation and pro-worker and pro-consumer, but it was mostly crickets. I've also seen a contingent of takes that really truly believe Microsoft did this for the good of the industry. The former takes are all shockingly naive. So my question is, what will it take for gamers as a community to realize that the PR shit that all of the big three attempt to shovel down your throat is a marketing move, and that corporations only look to serve their bottom line and not their fanboys? Do we have any hope of gamers becoming more critical of the industry with journalists and influencers who buy marketing speak hook, line, and sinker? Hope you are all well. Thank you, Chelsea, for writing in. She touches, Dustin, on something that we touched on earlier, but I wanted to kind of underline this idea of what is good and what is bad, and this idea that why are people so eager to defend corporations? What is it about a brand that makes people feel like the highs and lows of their life depend on the nature of the brand and the tenor of the brand? I feel like people make this mistake that that's a personality in and of itself. And I don't know. What do you think of that? Just that loose idea.
I think that there's a lot of angles to look at it. I mean, the internet has made us more tribalistic than ever. And I guess that the nice spin you could put on that is that the internet has also made us seek like-minded communities more than ever. You only have to interact with the people that like the things that you do and think the way that you do. And so these corporations they know exactly how to prey on you. And I think that, not to get too philosophical, but everyone is looking for a place where they belong. And so, Xbox or PlayStation, whatever, Nintendo, Disney, Star Wars, whatever, they know that trying to scratch that part of like, look, this is the people here also like the same thing that you do. We are your people. I made fun of the Phil Spencer quote, like, when we all game, we all win or whatever. But it's like, that's a marketing thing.
Of course it is. It's the same thing of Jim Ryan when we make fun of him when it's like, Jim, what game did you play? And he's like, well, I've been playing the brand new Insomniac third-person platformer, Ratchet and Clank, into the next.
He just squints at his calendar.
Yeah,
right.
It sucks.
And that's the thing is that, in PlayStation, they had their tagline for years was for the players. We're doing this for you because we like you. And it's hard because there is the dynamic between the artists, the creators, the developers that do create for the passion, for the love, and we enjoy those things that they create. And it is tied to business. And so it gets into this hairy situation when you use the passion for the creativity aspect of it, for the art of it, and they use that as marketing to get you to pull on that part of your heartstrings, whatever. I don't really know where I'm going with this anymore. Just that what will it take for as gamers, as a community, to realize that their PR is full of shit? I was hoping
that doesn't happen. That's not going to happen.
Yeah, I was hoping that reading that question would bring something to my mind to say, but simply it just doesn't.
There's a reason why advertising and PR, all of that. There's a reason why that works. There's a reason why advertising is like a millions and millions of dollars, and it's because it works. People are susceptible to ads. People are susceptible to anything that makes them associate brands with feeling. And we're at a point now where Nintendo, Microsoft, and Sony, they've been around long enough to ensnare generations. It wasn't always like that necessarily for Microsoft. Microsoft was the new kid on the block. They had a lot to prove. It was a very new thing. But now it's like, what, 20 years? That's a long time. And you've got a lot of people who are like ready to defend. And same thing with Sony. You're people who are just ready to defend because I remember Crash Bandicoot or I remember Legend of Dragoon. And it's just, it just reinforces this idea of, I care about my brand because my brand cares about me. Don't you remember those commercials where like you were the star of the PlayStation commercial? Remember those? They had all of these commercials about how like it was you. It's like you sitting in a bar with Nathan Drake and Kratos or whatever, and it's good advertising. It's good. It's the same. It's the same thing with the Halo Believe campaign. Like that shit was insane.
That was good.
And it's like there's a reason why that works, and there's a reason why people do it, and there's a reason why corporations do it. It's because it ensnares you, and that sounds like a little ominous, and I think it kind of is. It could be a positive thing, and you might have positive associations, and that's fair, and you might have met fantastic people along the way, and it might have shaped your life for the better. God knows it probably has. But there comes a point where people just kind of associate the brand with themselves, and I think whenever criticism is levied on that brand, then it kind of, I don't know, there's like an insecurity where it kind of like penetrates branding goes into the person. Or like I'm weird for liking this thing. Like why? Like, but it's not that. It's people have to understand it's not like a personal thing. It's just like this is just a weird thing to happen. This is a massive acquisition, and it's reasonable that people are a little concerned about it. And I even think it goes a little bit beyond this idea of fanboy talk, because I actually think the fanboy nature of it is actually like a very small aspect of what this is, especially when you're looking at games media, because what I think this is about is getting a leg up on Activision, because Activision has been a punching bag for a while now, and Microsoft picked the perfect time to acquire them, because now they get to look like the savior. They get to look like, okay, hey, we're coming in, and all those IPs that have been like just stranded, we're going to liberate all of them.
Or the IP that you feel bad for playing because of Activision.
Exactly. You know what? You feel bad about supporting Bobby Kotick? Well, guess what? He's out once this deal is done. And we did that. Without us, he would still be there. And people don't really think about it or care that he's going to leave there billions of dollars richer, because, I mean, quite frankly, he was already like unfathomably rich anyway. So I don't think it makes much of a difference to a lot of people. And maybe it shouldn't really. But I think that's how people are looking at this. I feel like people are looking at, hey, here's, Phil Spencer, and he's coming in and he's liberating all of these IPs that we've wanted to see for a while that have been squandered under Activision. Here's Phil Spencer coming in to get rid of Bobby Kotick by the end of the deal. And it's a lot more of a, I could see why it's easy to spin this in a very positive way. And they picked a really ample time. Like, I think people, quite frankly, don't give Microsoft enough credit. I think they're super fucking smart in the way that they do these things. And I think they targeted Bethesda first, because I think they knew, like we said at the time, that was one of the big publishers that they could go after, where it wouldn't have made such a big deal. It wouldn't have been such a big, like, ooh, this is a monopoly type deal, because it's Bethesda. They handle role-playing games. It's not like this massive thing that's outputting games every single year. But Activision, that's a big dog. That's like the top dog. They're putting out Call of Duty every year. That's a bit of a risky one. And the only way they were going to get away with that is if they could come out of that situation looking not like the company that's coming in and buying up the industry, but coming in as the company that's saving the industry from a sickness. And a sickness that is, Call of Duty. All these companies need to do Call of Duty and Call of Duty only. And we have a toxic work environment headed by this person who's just the worst. And they've successfully positioned themselves as the hero that solves both of the biggest problems facing outward from Activision to the public. And that is what I think is really happening here. And I think why you're seeing a lot of celebration where otherwise you might have seen a lot more consternation.
Yeah,
because I think that's why you're seeing more consternation. I think that's why you're seeing more consternation here than you did with the Bethesda thing too.
Sure.
You know, because this is a massive, way bigger acquisition.
Sure. Dustin and I
have been rambling.
No, it's great. What you were saying was great, and I totally agree. Dustin and I have been tweeting or texting each other like that. We love the crying Wojak PlayStation fanboy.
Yeah.
We love that meme. Like, I love that meme. In fact, we have to make sure we work that into this thumbnail.
Yeah,
but like for the thumbnail, I picture like a missile silo where there are like missiles stacked up, and the warheads at the top are the crying Wojak PlayStation.
Whoa.
But nonetheless, I think that what you're saying is right. I think that there is a very positive and easy spin that they can put on this to make things better. And yeah, when you're dealing with Activision, it can't get much worse. So we'll see what happens here. There are a few other questions I wanted to get through. I know we're going long on this, but there's so much I want to touch on. Art Vandalay wrote into us and said, guys, can we just stop the Sony will be fine attitude? Because at this point, it's pretty clear that Xbox is operating at full-on winner takes all mode. Microsoft is aggressively pushing the industry towards a subscription-based model, which will ultimately kill Sony's current business practices. Whether they will be positive or negative is up for debate, but all I know is that I like my PlayStation games the way they are now. If Game Pass does to games what Netflix did to movies, I'll be very unhappy. George is getting upset. Thank you, Art Vandalay, for writing in, and for your Seinfeld references, of course. Dustin, will Sony be fine?
I think that Sony will be fine, but like we've said, there will have to be changes to the business model. Whether that means Spartacus is much bigger or expands as it goes along, I don't know. But I think, Colin, what you said earlier about Call of Duty, the best-selling game, every purchase made on a PlayStation is giving them 60%, 70%, whatever, giving your competitor that. And so I don't know. I hate to just be the guy that's like, I don't know, but we've talked a lot about like quick reaction moves, or not quick reaction, but just obvious reaction, buying Square Enix, buying Capcom, something like that. But there's definitely going to have to be changes. I think Microsoft's probably not done, because it seemed like there were rumors about other purchases, and this is the one that came out of left field. And so I'm wondering if we'll see more. Microsoft is in a winner takes all, and you got to wonder, like, what is the kill move? Like, do you think there's a possibility that if Microsoft buys a few other big publishers with their big swinging dick money, that it is over for Sony? I don't know.
I don't think it's ever going to be over for PlayStation.
Yeah.
The question now from Art is, will Sony be fine? And yeah, I think Sony is going to be fine. In fact, I think it as it stands right now with this deal in place, I still think PlayStation 5 is likely going to win the generation, but it's not going to stay this way. I'm skeptical of any analysis of my own that doesn't and can't possibly take into account all of the things that are going to happen to come. But I think if you could just set into motion this exact thing in the future and just keep them static, I still think Sony wins. But I don't think it's going to be static like this. And we also don't know, as we were saying earlier, Sony seems pretty hell-bent on making sure Activision games stay with the expectation that they are. And as I noted, and I wrote my notes again, because I know we spoke about this last time, but I wanted to say it again, is the money is so staggering that I don't know what it suggests about how they intend on getting it back. Like, I don't know if it suggests like, oh, we are so in on Game Pass that we are way in over our heads with Game Pass. We need to just make sure Game Pass, these games are not going anywhere. Or is it we're spread so thin that, of course, the games will stay there. We're just not going to say that right now. And they'll be free on Game Pass in quotes, but you'll pay for them on Sony platforms. That was my instinct with Bethesda, and it was wrong. So I don't know. Like, my instinct with Bethesda at that amount of money was like, why would you spend that much money and not just keep the games where they are? So I don't know. We'll see. Chris, do you think Sony will be fine? Quote unquote, Sony will be fine. Yeah,
because I mean, ultimately, we talk a lot about the 70-30 cut. Where like, oh well, every cut of Call of Duty is going to go more to Microsoft than Sony, but I mean, they're still going to presumably sell an equivalent amount of. I just don't see necessarily that they're going to necessarily be put on the back foot to the point where they're going to like die. Like, they're going to be fine. I think they own an entire storefront of games, and that alone kind of puts them in a situation where they're a lot more safe and secure than they otherwise would be. They have it's the reason why Steam is so set, is because like on PC they just have the entire market share of just like they get to sell they get a cut of every single game on PC. Yeah, you've got Epic. Yeah, you've got what do you call these other launchers that I can't even remember at this point, but they're not really a part of the conversation in the way that Steam is. So they're fine. And I think PlayStation being the dominant hardware platform, not only last generation, but going into this generation and continuing, kind of puts them in a good situation as well, where they could do really, really well just coasting off of the sales of every game that people are buying on PlayStation. People need to understand the money that these corporations are generating is insane. Like, they will be fine. The issue is, how long can they ignore this before it starts to cut at their bottom line in a way that is noticeable, in a way that requires action? Because there's no doubt, if Call of Duty is free on Game Pass, that's going to definitely change some people's minds. We've seen, though, that Game Pass games sell really well on PlayStation anyway. Outriders was a pretty good example of that. Outriders was free on Xbox, but it sold substantially well on PlayStation. So it's not like it's a be-all, end-all. It's not going to be like no one's going to buy a game on PlayStation ever again just because they can get it for free on Game Pass. It's clearly not the case. But there is a point to be made about Activision and how big they are and how big their revenue streams matter to PlayStation specifically because of Call of Duty every year, that maybe as the years go on, those might dwindle a bit. And even if they don't dwindle, they're still making a ton of money for the competitor. So it just puts them at an awkward... It's more of an awkward situation than it is a situation where they're like, I'm dying. You know? They just need to make smart business moves and compete. And to be fair, I'm not sure if they can, but at least in the capacity that they're at right now with Spartacus and what that's expected to be. But they've got to do something, not reactionary, not scatterbrained, but Spartacus needs to hit, because if Spartacus doesn't hit, that's not going to look good. If Spartacus comes out and it's a mess and it's like really unappealing and people are comparing it to Game Pass and being like, well, yeah, we get to play fucking Klonoa on PS1, but we have to pay for that. You know, I really think the back compat thing is going to be a big deal. Like, I think that alone, and I mentioned this I'm sorry, I'm rambling a little bit, but I mentioned this on Dustin's stream the other night, where I feel like the tiered structure or the tiered nature of the back compat system needs to change. I think that is a kind of a big problem. I think because Xbox does such a good job of making sure your backwards compatible titles are like drawn from previous purchases and you own those irrespectively of whether or not you're subscribed to anything. I think that alone is going to have negative optic implications for the back compatibility system in this Spartacus thing, if it exists, which we presume it will. They're just going to have to make smart business decisions in order to really remain competitive, but they will be fine.
Yeah.
Will they be great?
I think I agree with you in the sense that I think Sony as a company and the PlayStation brand itself was in a way worse position in, let's say, 2007 than it is now.
Right.
So
$599 US.
I mean, PS3 was, 2006, 2007, 2008 was dire shit. It was fun again to be a PlayStation fan at that point because it was just like a cult. But maybe it'll become that way again. I don't know. That's where Podcast Beyond and all that Podcast Beyond started during that era. That's where the cultish shit we used to do on that show came from, like the Beyond call and all that kind of stuff. So we'll see. I think Sony will be fine. And like I said, I think PlayStation 5 wins still, just because I think there's so much brand loyalty, but that's based on a current reading and certainly not a future reading. Braxton Wilkerson wrote in and said, "Howdy, Crustin. Hope you are all doing well. Do you think we may see a Sony first-party first-person shooter in the works now that Call of Duty is owned by Microsoft? If so, do you think they would use an old IP like Killzone or make something new? I got to say, guys, it's more imperative than ever now that not only does Sony have one iron in the fire, but many. The reality is that Sony is now going to be competing against an entity that owns Halo, Call of Duty, Doom, Wolfenstein, even shit like Hexen and random stuff that they can bring back if they want. They have a lot of shooter Singularity. They have a lot of Overwatch, right? They have a lot of shooters, lots and lots and lots and lots of shooters. Now, I don't think that was ever going to be Sony's identity, but yes, they must bring back Killzone and they must bring back Resistance and they must bring back SOCOM. I think if one or two of those isn't already in the oven, I'd be shocked. And God willing that we get at least 2 or 3 of those back in addition to new IP to compete, especially because I like shooters and I would like to see more of them on PlayStation. So what do you think, Chris?
No, I think absolutely you want to do this. If you're not already doing this, you absolutely have to do this, because I think the main reason for maybe them not maybe seeing it as a main priority was Call of Duty sells so great, on PlayStation, and we have we have third parties taking care of our shooter need for us. So why would we do that?
Yeah,
but now it's obviously that's not the situation.
That was my argument
now
on this show for as long as I've been on it, was why do it when they have COD. So obviously that's not the case anymore.
Now you can't. So you gotta. I would say, look, this is probably gonna upset Colin, but let's just take Killzone and put them in a box for right now. You've got Resistance. Yep. You've got Resistance, which I think is substantially more interesting, substantially more unique in my opinion, and you have SOCOM just sitting there, just waiting. These might not be the haymakers that you want them to be, but you gotta do something. In my opinion, like, you have to respond to that, because that is Microsoft owns every major first-person shooter except for Battlefield, really.
Yeah, like Battlefield, and then like some of the freemium stuff like Apex, right?
That's it. They own Quake.
Right, Quake. That's another one.
That's crazy.
Yeah, everything from id. Yeah, it is a while. I think it's there more than anywhere that they have a massive advantage with shooters. It's just, how can you even? There is no competition. There hasn't been a first person, an FPS from first party since 2013. So that to me is almost shows an unacceptable level of mismanagement to just not have anything.
It's definitely negligent.
But I think, to the point Dustin said, they were probably kind of riding on Call of Duty. That's what brings in, we don't know the details of the contract. For all we know, Call of Duty League is on PlayStation until 2030 or something, in which case this is all moot and we just don't know that yet. But you think Sony might say something like that? Maybe they don't want to fuck around now, and they're dealing with like a company that they've been softening with, I think, with Microsoft, and now that's fucking with them again. And I think that Sony, knowing the people that run the company and like the marketers and the PR people and all that, just like I can sense like probably a lot of consternation there right now.
Oh, for sure.
All right. This is an interesting question from Michael Centeno that I wanted to kind of talk about. He says, "Hey, Colin, the gang, with Microsoft acquiring Activision and their numerous IP, I can't help but think that Microsoft can't handle managing that many studios and maintaining a quality product. Even before the acquisition, it seems like they already had their work cut out for them. Do you agree? And how would you handle it if you were Phil Spencer?" This is an interesting question. This is an unwieldy first party, and you can't run all of these from a centralized position. You can't. I know that now Phil Spencer is going to be CEO of Microsoft Gaming. Then there'll be people from Bethesda reporting to him, Microsoft Game Studios, and then Activision. And my assumption is that Activision Blizzard King will be kept as its own subdivision. I think Hoag's prognostication that they will just rename the company is true. He thinks they're going to rename the company King, but just keep that as a separate entity and let them kind of run themselves in a decentralized way, I think is the smartest thing. I think the one thing that I would body Xbox on, if I were being honest, was this point that they don't really internally make good games. They're making moves or great games, a bulk of them. They've made moves since the 2018, 2019 acquisitions to acquire teams, to give wonderful teams like Obsidian, to give them content. And then, of course, with Bethesda, they get a bunch of talented teams as well. But it is true that none of that has borne fruit yet. And now the Bethesda stuff is too soon, probably. But I don't think it's too soon to expect some fruit from the studios they bought back in the day when I still lived in California. And so I would kind of be skeptical about that. I said on the other show, some people took issue with it, but I'll reiterate that the games that Microsoft are best known for are by and large games that they didn't make or that they went out and acquired and didn't make internally. And that, I think, is part of the reason why I think culture is so important and why it matters that they went and bought Halo. It matters that they put money behind BioShock and Mass Effect, even though they didn't make them. It matters that Titanfall came from EA and Respawn. I think that's part of the reason what they're trying to fix, but it didn't come from within. And that's part of what I think makes the brand so hollow to me in some ways, is it just seems like it's Netflix. And I don't look at Netflix and be like, well, Netflix is brute forcing its way here. It's not here because I respect it. And that's true. And I respect that games like Uncharted and The Last of Us and God of War and Horizon and Ghost of Tsushima, those are all unique to Sony Studios. They didn't go out and buy any of that stuff. And so I think that that's a different sort of angle. Now, will that change with Starfield? Will that change? Maybe, but I would also argue that we're not going to see the fruits of what really happens for a while too, because even games like Psychonauts, Microsoft had nothing to do with that game. That game was in development long before Double Fine came under Microsoft. Starfield is another one of those games. So I just think if there is a reason to be skeptical, maybe it's that. And why I think maybe staying smaller and leaner would be smarter for Sony. Like if Sony went out and bought a Square Enix, they would have to do it under the auspices of keeping them separate from themselves.
Right.
Because I don't think that's one of the things I fear, is that I don't want them to mix up their own culture. I don't know what Microsoft's culture is. Like, what does it mean to be an Xbox player? Like, what is the Xbox's identity? I don't know. I know that PlayStation's identity is narrative and third person and all those kinds of things, high quality games. So I guess we're going to have to just see. But I wanted to point out, Michael, that I think Phil Spencer definitely has his work cut out for him. Very talented man, smart, understands gaming, plays games, understands the business, but this is a lot of teams. And the reality is that if they get this all synchronized, as we said, this is a game, a AAA game at this point, every 2 months, probably they can get out. I mean, that's nutty, but that's going to require you to get your shit in order. And Microsoft can do it. But I do think that the bigger you get, the more you lose your ability to be nimble.
And I think just important to mention, Colin, that the studios they just bought, not necessarily in a great spot. They're going to need a lot of management change, lot of reworking of culture. So It's an uphill. It's not just like okay, everything's working and now we got to organize. We've got to fix what we just bought. There's a lot of work to do.
Yeah, it's like a house almost. It's like you have to be like, all right, well, the boiler's fucked and the plumbing's destroyed. We gotta really rip into this thing. Yeah, they got their work cut out for them. I feel like it's almost part of it strikes me as really smart in a way, because Phil Spencer knows that he can't on hands manage all these things, but at the same time, it might be better for them if they don't. It might be better for Bethesda and Activision if Microsoft isn't just coming down on them being like, you got to do this, and just sort of like is pushed to leave them on their own just for the sheer feasibility of making sure that something comes out of these studios, leaving it in their own devices. I feel like that's really the only way you get anything out of this. You can't manage these. You can't micromanage these studios.
No,
it's just too many.
Yeah, I wonder like what the orchestra looks like behind the scenes with keeping all of this together. And again, it's why I draw a contrast and why I think the argument that Microsoft is just doing what Sony has done is just so ridiculous and so stupid, because the acquisitions Sony has made have largely added to and contributed to the culture before they were even acquired. And people are like, well, what about when Sony bought Sucker Punch? And but no one look it up. Just say it to your radio. What game did Sucker Punch make that was not published by PlayStation and funded by PlayStation? There's one. I bet you most people have no idea, because it's a fucking N64 game called Rocket, and that didn't take anything away from anyone when Sony started working with Sucker Punch, and then they bought them after that. And what's the game that Guerrilla made before Killzone? Does anyone know out there? I do. It's Shell Shock. And no one cared when Sony bought them, because they invested in Killzone and then bought them later. And with Housemarque, Housemarque has made almost all PlayStation games since 2007. So they go and they buy them. Bluepoint, working with PlayStation before they were bought, then working with them after they bought. That's why these studios, frankly, just make sense. And why I'm fearful that, again, not to beat a dead horse, that this is just going to force Sony's hand to start making acquisitions that do not synchronize with what they have built. And I think that if they can go back and even look at some of the choices they made, they might be like, man, we maybe shouldn't have shut down Evolution. Man, maybe we shouldn't have shut down Zipper. Maybe we, we're going to talk about.
I have no doubt they're thinking that for sure right now.
Because those were part of the culture. They were part of the culture. Zipper was part of the culture. It's gone. So I don't know.
They're different. It's a different thing. Like the only thing that I think really is comparable in Xbox first party to Sony first party is Halo, specifically because they acquired Halo, but Halo was not going to be what it turned. Like if it was not on a console, it wouldn't have meant shit. So that's like the only thing that I could give, really. And maybe
I was going to say Forza.
I don't even know what Fable was.
Well, Fable. I think Fable, and I was going to say Forza, but there's no doubt that Forza and Turn 10 are the exact thing I'm talking about. Turn 10 was made by Microsoft internally. They work on a series of games that they made themselves, and they're very talented at it. That's the exact model that I wish that they followed with all their studios, and that everyone followed, because it's just more organic and interesting. Because it's hard to say, like, rare. It's hard to say, well, what about when Sony bought Guerrilla? And it's like, but so again, it's just disingenuous. Buying Guerrilla didn't do anything to anyone else because they weren't making anything for anyone else already. Don't you get it?
Right.
You know, like Housemarque wasn't making anything for anyone else. Bluepoint wasn't making anything for anyone else. Insomniac wasn't going to make anything for anyone else. You know, they tried. Remember, Insomniac going back to Sony is a really interesting saga because they tried and they weren't happy working with Microsoft and working with Oculus and all these things. And Sony came in and bought them. Oh my God, $229 million. By the way, what a steal. $229 million is what? I can't even do the math of fucking like 150th of what it costs to get Activision. So it's, again, these are just apples and oranges. When we see Sony start spending in the billions, which has never happened on an acquisition for even Gaikai, was $500 million.
Yeah.
So, which is the foundation for PlayStation Now. So I just think that we're dealing with different numbers. And when we start dealing with those different numbers, then we'll start dealing with different entities, and we can try to garner how they're similar and how they're different. But the reality is that Sony has never made a purchase like Microsoft has. And I don't think Microsoft has ever made a purchase like Sony has. Because even when they bought their studios a la carte, they were just buying random teams, not teams with Xbox heritage necessarily, with the exception of maybe Undead Labs. So I don't know, something worth pointing out. But I think that that's also a hollow argument because it doesn't really make sense towards the reality of what's actually going on. Tyler Cobb wrote in and said, "Sup CDC, with you know what having just occurred, it got me thinking. If Western third-party support for PlayStation devices continued to dwindle down, would Sony be able to stick it out the way Nintendo has? They do have some very attractive IP in God of War, Ratchet, The Last of Us, etc. Tons of legacy software to offer through streaming and backwards compatibility, and world-class dev teams. Personally, I don't think the odds would be too bad, but what do you guys think? Dustin, do you think Sony could survive in a shell like Nintendo has? They've obviously come out of their shell, but they at their worst moments, they had to rely on themselves, and they survived, but it didn't work out. Wii U was outsold by Vita. It's not like that's bad news. That's why everyone thought the Switch was just kind of, it was a good idea, but maybe not going to catch on. But they managed to survive. Do you think Sony can go in a shell until they figure it out and survive like that?
I think that they maybe could for a very short period, but it's not in the way that Nintendo survived an entire generation. Just because the level of IP is not the same. Don't get me wrong. Sony IP, very strong, very powerful, with a lot of value, but it's not anywhere close to Mario and Donkey Kong and Zelda and the mass worldwide appeal, which I guess Sony has mass worldwide appeal, but I just don't see it.
It's not. It is not the same.
It's not the same.
Those are like synonymous with video games. You know.
Yeah.
Like that's like when somebody says a video game, like usually like anybody who's outside of the industry probably thinks of like Mario and Zelda and Pokemon and stuff like that. So I know where you're coming from.
Yeah.
I think I don't know if they could do that for a long period. I think they could probably, but like you said, Dustin, I don't know for how long. I don't know for an entire generation. I don't know if that works. That pans out.
Right. Yeah. Not like, I mean, the Wii U, I think they were able to survive because of the success of the Wii and the DS. They were able to coast for a bit, which again, Sony could, like I said, coast for a bit, but not to the same extent.
Yeah.
I'm just doing math real quick.
Nerd.
Yeah. So yeah.
That sucks.
So this deal could have produced 500 is equivalent to the production cost of 586 $150 million game productions. So basically 586 The Last of Us's. That's the amount of money that they put into this deal. I'm not saying that you would get The Last of Us every time you tried to make The Last of Us, but they went all in on few products. And this goes into the last two questions, which I kind of want to read in tandem before we get into the rest of the news. There is more. Joe Hammonds wrote in and said, "Sup, Crustlin? If subscriptions became the norm, do you think it will change our perception of game quality? Could a 60 or 70 on Metacritic today translate to an 80 or 90 in 10 years' time? I could see a future where we concede to playing mediocre games simply because there's nothing else available. Thanks for the hours of entertainment and insight." And Robert McEnany wrote in and said, "Gentlemen, what is Xbox's endgame?" Well, I think Xbox's endgame, Robert, to answer you first, is to put Game Pass everywhere. That's, I think, the endgame. And I don't think they give a flying fuck if they ever produce another disc again. And I don't think they care if they ever sell another a la carte title ever again. I think they're in on the subscription model, very much like they were in on the subscription model for, let's say, Office and Defender and whatever other kinds of things you can get from Microsoft. You don't really buy anything from them anymore. And I know that some people go into this like great reset kind of right-wing theory of you're not going to own anything, you're going to like it, and you're going to sleep in a pod, and you're going to eat bugs and all this kind of shit, which is funny. But I think that the end game, regardless of what they want, Robert, is what Joe is describing. And this is maybe why I'm most skeptical of all. I love Netflix. I think it's cool. But how many pieces of bullshit do you need to wade through to get to Ozark? How many pieces of bullshit on Hulu do you need to get through to get to The Handmaid's Tale? These different places ultimately survive not on accessibility of old items, but on the churn also of new ones. And I think Microsoft is going to be in a position that is going to be first an expensive position and also a dangerous position, which is that they're going to need to constantly produce food for this beast that they're making. And it might be insatiable, and it might force us to look at things differently. And does it feel... Listen, I don't want to be disrespectful to Halo Infinite because I know people really like it. I'm sure it's a great game. But how are we going to feel about... Well, let me back up. There's no game like God of War on Game Pass, right? There's no game like The Last of Us on Game Pass. How are we going to feel when those games come, which is good, but then maybe when they're further and further between, fewer and further between? And I don't know that a subscription service is attractive to me because of that reason. In fact, I have PlayStation Plus because I like just the smattering of free games. I don't have PlayStation Now. I'm not so sure I would even get Spartacus. Because it doesn't really resonate with the way I play. Like the idea of having many games isn't exciting to me. That would have been very exciting to me when I was a kid, but now I can afford any game I want, and I like to spend time with the games I play. So that is a fear of mine. Chris, are you fearful of maybe a lesser quality to fill in the holes in a subscription model and what the demands of a subscription model kind of puts forth? Because I think the only subscription, by the way, that dodges this is Amazon, because Amazon's like, the streaming shit, like, what do you care? You're doing it for packages, right? So they're like, this is all free over here. And so no one really gives them a hard time. But even they are investing $1 billion in The Lord of the Rings, right? So it's
yeah.
It's just nuts. Well, anyway, what do you think about that?
I don't know. I think there is reason to be concerned, only because we've seen the way this kind of affects not necessarily Netflix, but I think maybe stuff like the App Store or whatever. We haven't had exactly a subscription model in the App Store in the same way that we have.
Well, Apple Arcade now, right?
The same way. Yeah. But even Apple Arcade is probably better than whatever it was before. You know, like when it was just like, hey, here's a bunch of ads, you know, in your fucking Snake clone, you know. So I don't know. I think there's reason to be skeptical. I think there's a reason to be concerned. But am I concerned that a 60 or 70 today would be an 80 or 90 in 10 years time? I actually think we kind of have the opposite problem right now, where I think a lot of games are looked over if they're not cinematic enough. I appreciate things like The Last of Us and God of War and especially Ghost of Tsushima. I love Ghost of Tsushima. But I think the Sony kind of method of, we're going to make this really, we're going to focus on every pixel of every blade of grass, and it's going to look gorgeous. And then people look at like a 2D game and they're like, fucking sucks. fucking let's not Cyber Shadow. What's that? Who cares? I almost feel like there's this unfair kind of assertion or assumption about a game based on its distance from looking like The Last of Us. That is kind of happening now, where it's almost like the opposite problem of what he's describing. I don't think games that are mediocre today are going to be amazing in 10 years. I think a mediocre game is always going to be mediocre. You could release Mass Effect Andromeda in 10 years, and I assure you, I promise you, no one's going to be like, whoa, at least it works, which is a shame that that's even remotely possible. But, I do think that we're going to see games that are a little bit different, that prioritize different things like Sea of Thieves, which, you could argue, you look at Sea of Thieves and compare it to something like God of War. It's not the same game. It's not even remotely close. But Sea of Thieves is unmistakably like a kind of a phenomenon, and it's kind of gone under the radar, and it's kind of amassed this crazy following because turns out it is really good. And it's a game that nobody really understood early on. And I think it's possible that we have a future where we actually have a larger breadth of more interesting things due to the subscription model, just purely based on how interactivity changes the medium that we're in right now. Television is a bit different because, you're sitting there, it's very passive. Netflix just wants to pump shit out that's going to occupy your time. And I do think that exists in freemiumware and especially on the mobile platforms. But I think games inherently, because they require you to interact with them, the level of quality that people are willing to put up with is inherently like a lot. You're not going to sit and play Andromeda for a very, very long time. You're not going to sit there and play day one No Man's Sky for a very, very long time. Your patience will be worn thin, and it's going to hurt your experience on the subscription model. It's going to make you spend less time on it. And I don't know. I think there is a possible future where this ends up being kind of interesting and kind of good. I don't necessarily think it's inherently the path that we're on. I don't think it's 100% certain, but I also don't want to be super doom and gloom about it because there's a lot of games that I've played through Game Pass that kind of I would never have played, and I appreciate that. And I think that's really cool and really good in some ways. But I don't know. It's going to be years before we see the effects of what is happening here. And even before we see the effects of what's happened with Bethesda and that acquisition. It's going to be a long time before we really see anything out of this that could be marked and analyzed in a way that we can really predictively analyze like what the trends will be. But I remain hopeful that maybe this is the way out of this weird NFT bullshit. Like we don't get Ubisoft selling a gun for $2,000 and instead you get, a free game on Game Pass that might be interesting or might
Leave
not.
the doom and gloom to me.
Yeah, you'll be the doom and gloom guy.
Dustin, do you have anything to add?
I don't think I have anything too crazy to add since I think Chris's, what he said was pretty all-encompassing other than just thinking about, and this doesn't answer Joe's question directly, but just thinking about how this changes and how the service changes in the next 10 years is that I think that people also need to consider that as this service becomes more expensive for Microsoft, we've talked about the sustainability. The price of Game Pass must go up at some point.
I mean, obviously.
And I think that that's what the value aspect of it. Think about Netflix in its early days, the value of Netflix and how you could spend. Well, wasn't it to start like the streaming was $8 a month?
Yeah, it was something really, really low. And now it's more than twice that.
And now it's more than twice that. But I guess the thing that you can still consider, like also with Netflix, it's $20 a month, but there's the idea of there may be a lot of shit, but there's enough quality stuff that it is still worth the $20. It's just the annoyance of finding the good stuff. So Game Pass theoretically could be twice as much. It could be $30 a month. And I think that it would still hopefully be of value. Think about if you're playing one AAA game on it a month that's $60, then that would still be worth it for the consumer.
The big benefit that a video game has is if you like a video game a lot, you can spend an insane amount of hours with it. Whereas like a TV show, you get like you watch Ozark, and that's maybe a week, and then it's done, and then you have really no reason to have the service anymore. If you find even one game that hooks you on Game Pass, then you're in, and that's I think that's what they're betting on, with the sheer breadth of like everything they're just throwing at the store, or throwing into the service. I don't know. This is fucking crazy.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. I need a fainting couch to rest now. After all of this.
Yeah.
But there's more news to get through, boys. This will be quicker,
all
though.
Right. Yeah.
A couple of things actually been added this morning. Trio of release dates we need to talk about. Number 2, it appears the release date for Ghostwire Tokyo may have inadvertently leaked, and it's a hell of a lot sooner than any of us would have thought. According to a report on website MP First, the object page for Ghostwire Tokyo on PlayStation 5 and on PSN has been updated with a release date, March 24th. And they have a screenshot to prove it. March 24th seems to be too specific to be a mistake or placeholder. It's a Thursday. It's not the first or last day of the month, etc., though it does fall near the end of the fiscal year, which would only lend credence to this being the date. Obviously, they don't want to get that money in. Still, that's all we have to work off of for now. Ghostwire Tokyo, a timed PlayStation 5 exclusive from Japanese studio Tango Gameworks, was revealed back in 2019. At the time, Tango's parent publisher, Bethesda, was still independent. Now, as we know, it's owned by Microsoft, making Tango an Xbox studio, putting out the final product from an old pre-deal contract. Tango is, of course, well known for being founded by horror game legend Shinji Mikami. They have 2 other games under their belt, 2014's The Evil Within, which came to PS3 and PS4, and 2017's The Evil Within 2, which came to PS4. Dustin, Ghostwire Tokyo, possibly in March. What do you make of that?
Red flags for me. We have not seen this game in a while. We still don't really even know. I mean, we've seen the gameplay trailer where they throw a bunch of clips together, but we don't really understand a lot about this game. And so to release it that soon and not have the marketing cycle already going,
I feel like this game,
promising.
Well, first of all, the game lost its director, right?
Yeah.
And then I don't want to, I'm not accusing anything untoward of happening, because I'm really not, but I just don't think they care about this game. I think they're like, it's going to be on Game Pass one day, obviously. Let's just get it out. Let's not spend any more time than absolutely necessary to get to the letter of the contract we signed. And I think that might be it. It also might be that this date isn't accurate, but it just, March 24th is just way too specific. Chris, what do you think? Are you going to play Ghostwire Tokyo?
Sure. Like, why not? I'm curious about it. It did strike me as an interesting title. I'm not sure if I'm sold on the tone of it, because I remember being excited for it when I thought it was going to be like a straight up more of a horror thing and less of an action oriented thing. But I'm interested in seeing what this is.
Cool.
Because I still kind of don't know really much about it.
I'm sure there'll be Japanese. A state of play or something about it. What'd you say, Dustin?
I said it's Japanese. That's all,
Well, it's definitely Japanese.
As Chris said, it's, it's Japanese. Therefore, this is the way the world I want it to be. So I'm going to play it.
Yeah.
Number 3, after a seemingly absurd litany of delays, LEGO Star Wars The Skywalker Saga finally has a release date. The game will launch on PlayStation 4 and PlayStation 5 on April 5th. Announced back in 2019 and originally slated for a 2020 release, it appears both COVID and plenty of development issues cropped up, pushing the game back substantially. That said, while LEGO games are typically chock full of content, it appears developer Traveler's Tales has upped the ante substantially. There will be 45 levels in the game, 5 from each of the 9 core Star Wars movies, as well as more than 300 playable characters. It will mark Traveler's Tales' first release since 2019, when it launched the LEGO Movie 2 video game on PS4. Before that, it was best known for annual and multi-annual releases of LEGO products. However, it may have come at a cost. A new expose on website Polygon indicates the scene at Traveler's Tale is chaotic and potentially abusive, and full of the evil C word. Cunt. No, I'm only kidding. Crunch.
Oh!
Now, I'm excited about LEGO Star Wars, the Skywalker Saga. I really am. And when I found this news out, I texted my nephew. I brought up my nephew before that loves Uncharted. I bought this for him in quotes 2 years ago for his birthday, and it still hasn't come. So I'm excited to finally deliver the goods. It was going to be on PS4. Now I'll give it to him on his PS5 because he's a good boy. Are either of you going to play this? Chris, are you interested in this game at all? I know you guys are not Star Wars people per se. I'm a lapsed Star Wars person, but that's why I'm very attracted to this, because I want to see the level of love and detail put into some of the movies I do enjoy.
I don't know. This feels like Lego Star Wars and Lego games in general feel like games I need to play with, I don't know, like younger sibling or like nephews. It's not. This is a co-op game primarily, from what I've heard from a lot of people who have dabbled in this series in the past, and I think I'm good. You know, I'm sure it's good. I'm sure it's going to be everything that people want it to be. But it's Star Wars and Lego, both as a combination, have never really, as video games, drawn me to them in any real meaningful way.
Dustin, I personally find these games very playable and fun, but I am also not, like, I don't play every one of them. I dip in and out, but it's been a while. So I think I'm like really ready. I'm for some reason really excited about this. I don't know why. I feel like it's a great podcast game. It's going to be great to just lay back. You can probably spend a shit ton of time with it, relax after a long day, whatever. What do you think about this?
I watched the trailer that they put out, and there's just a staggering amount of new aspects to this game. It has a new camera angle. It has the Sony third person over the shoulder view instead of like a top down. So that's kind of interesting. There's space battles in this game. There's, I don't know if it was like some kind of upgrade skill tree type system for characters as well. Then of course you mentioned the amount of levels spanning across all 9 games, 300 characters. And if there's not Max Rebo, not playing it. I just got to say, we got to have Max Rebo, no doubt.
Sly Snoodles and Droopy McCool. We got to get the whole band.
Droopy McCool, yeah, the whole band. Damn, that'd be
Droopy
something.
McCool have his keyboard. The Elephant Man. Okay, cool. Well, Star Wars.
Wait, no,
I'm sorry.
The keyboard man is
that's Max Rebo.
Is Max Rebo.
You're right. Sly Snoodles is. I'm sorry. Droopy McCool is the saxophone player.
Sounds right.
I think.
I don't know.
Well, they're not really saxophones.
We're gonna get called out for this.
I can see them on my face. Sly Snoodles is the one that's like really thin. Max Rebo is the big elephant.
Yes.
And then Droopy McCool is the guy that has this kind of like white gray, like I don't know.
Sly Snoodles is the one that they added the horrible CG scene,
right? The lips
in Return of the Jedi,
right?
With the lips that makes you just want to die, quite frankly, when you see it.
She looks like she can suck a golf ball out of a garden hose, though. Am I right?
That exists on the internet. Don't send it to me, please. But yeah, I think it'll be cool. I don't know if I'm a day one on this, but I'm excited to see them change up the formula. You mentioned about how it's been annualized, and I think I kind of found myself burnt out on playing any of these games. So the fact that they really took time to make something new and different is cool.
I have a confession too that I'm just looking for things to play, because I actually scratched Mushroom Wars 2 off my list. It came out last week very silently. First of all, it's way too expensive, but also it doesn't have a platinum trophy.
You are fucked.
How? No.
I have to say that every time now.
No.
Anytime you bring this up.
I was saying that Micah was saying the same thing to me, and here's how I explained it. If you don't care enough about your $40 game to put a platinum trophy in it, to know that that's just like the protocol on the system, then you don't care about the audience. And I'm not going to buy your game. It goes, especially because it's got 1,000 points on Xbox. Don't bring that shit around here, Mushroom Wars. Oh. No. All right, the third game with the release date that we need to talk about is number 4, a long-awaited and delayed wrestling game, WWE 2K22, has a release date. It will launch on March 8th on PlayStation 4 and PlayStation 5. As you may recall, this is actually the first WWE game since 2019, making this release a big one. The Japanese studio Yuke's, known worldwide for its wrestling games, was once the shepherd of this series, but when NBA 2K studio Visual Concepts took over, the series entered a serious rut. WWE 2K20, launched on PS4 in 2019, was destroyed by critics and sold poorly, convincing publisher Take-Two and label 2K to forego a yearly release for the first time in 20 years to get things right. Bad news, though. If you don't pre-order one of the special editions, that March 8th release date becomes March 11th for you. So early March for WWE. I know we have nothing to say about it, but I know a lot of people are excited about that as well. Number 5, the God of War reboot, which launched on PlayStation 4 in 2018, launched on PC just last week. And perhaps not surprisingly, it's proving mega popular, particularly on Steam. As relayed by Steam's scraping database website SteamDB, the game has so far reached peak concurrent players of 75,000. This is substantial and is the best showing yet for a PlayStation first or second party game on PC. Horizon Zero Dawn reached a number about 20,000 lower than God of War, while Days Gone was even lower. Second party releases like the Quantic Dream and That Game Company titles were even lower. This is great news for Sony as they seek to expand the field in the face of staunch competition. However, the numbers should also be put into context. God of War has sold 20 million copies on PS4 and likely had several million concurrents when it launched in 2018. And it's clear that a majority of the audience for the next game, Ragnarok, due out late this year, will remain on console. But with high critical marks and a whole new slate of players, God of War proves Sony was right to bring its games to PC, which it will now do in a more mechanical fashion with the purchase of PC port studio Netease in 2021. This game was actually ported internally, as far as I know, or at least produced by them internally. Likewise, in a conversation with publication Game Informer, God of War director Cory Barlog said the following, indicating strong internal support for PC projects as well. When asked why Sony finally bit the bullet and went to PC, he said, quote, "I think it was the collective of studios all over saying this is a really good idea. We should be looking into this. Eventually, I think it reached the tipping point when we had sent so many suggestion box suggestions that they were like, we're tired of hearing all this. Fine, we'll do this." End quote. Chris, what do you think about God of War's performance on PC? 75,000 concurrents, a whole new player base, some horrifying things that people are doing to it, mods.
Oh, yeah. I think it's cool. I like it. I like seeing the fact that they got this game running in ultra wide too is really cool because it's a single shot game, and you can imagine that there's probably a lot of assets and a lot of polishing just off screen that was never done because they never had to account for that. So the fact that it's getting high marks and they really went in and put the time in, I'm hearing really good things about the fact about the nature of it as a PC port. And that's always good. That's the last thing you want is a botched PC port. That can stain the reputation of a game for a really, really, really long time. So I'm glad they did it, and I hope they do it like this more.
What do you think, Dustin?
Bloodborne, let's go. Okay, what's happening?
Yeah,
it's time. Okay, we got the God of War out of the way. We have Uncharted on the way. Unfortunately, I'm guessing the next one is going to be Ghost of Tsushima, I would assume. But no, I'm glad to see that it's well received. And that's, I think, one of the big takeaways. This shouldn't be a surprise to any company, but you do a good PC port of a great game, people will flock to it. And this seems like Sony kind of learned their lesson with the Horizon Zero Dawn port kind of coming out in a little bit of a half-baked state. And so making sure this one was good, it was important. And I think I'm glad that they did what needed to be done. And so I think the future is bright of PlayStation games on PC. I guess the big question is just what the ordering is going forward. I keep wondering, like, what's the first PS5 game to get a PC port? Maybe Demon Souls, which maybe next year, I would think. They don't want to make it too soon. I think two-ish, 3 years is probably a good move.
Yeah.
Number 6, be not alarmed, but PlayStation 3 games have begun appearing on the PlayStation 5 storefront, though you cannot buy them nor download them. And it may just be a bug, or maybe not. Multiple sources report that, at least for a time in the UK, certain PS3 titles began popping up during searches on PlayStation 5. An example of this is Dead or Alive 5, a PlayStation 3 fighting game from 2012. As Video Games Chronicle notes in part, quote, "When viewing a PS3 game on the PS5 store, the listing should direct the player towards the PlayStation Now version of the game. However, Dead or Alive 5 displays a price, £7.99. There are other games too, including some Prince of Persia titles. Whether or not there's anything remains to be seen, but it comes under a cloud of rumors about a so-called Project Spartacus, PlayStation's potential answer for Microsoft's increasingly mighty Game Pass, which now totes more than 25 million subscribers. Part of Spartacus will reportedly be a suite of backwards compatibility options, which will no doubt include PS3 games. And this can be part of that, showing a la carte purchases may be possible. That said, we also know that PlayStation Now will likely be shutting down, as evidenced not only by Spartacus rumors, but by harder news of the removal of PlayStation Now cards from some retail channels. This may also have something to do with that, as Sony sheds the PlayStation Now branding. However, some think this is much ado about nothing and points out that the games have appeared before. I don't know. We've talked a lot about Spartacus. I won't belabor the point here, but there are indications that there are things happening in the back end. Worth keeping an eye on. There are some people that know PlayStation really well that think this is nothing, and there are some people I've talked to that know PlayStation really well thinking that this is a sign of things to come. So we will see. And obviously, keep searching and seeing what you find on PlayStation Network. You can always let us know. Number 7, the following news may be nothing, but then again, maybe it is. Website Video Games Chronicle reports that Sony has moved to renew trademarks for Psygnosis. If that name is unfamiliar to you, here's the rub. Psygnosis was once one of the most famous British game developers ever. Founded in 1984, the team was best known for franchises like Shadow of the Beast, Lemmings, and Wipeout, the latter of which would become a key PlayStation franchise early in the brand's life. However, Psygnosis is also notable because it was the first studio Sony outright purchased, even before the original PlayStation launched. By the PS2 era, it was renamed with the moniker you'd probably be much more familiar with, Studio Liverpool. The bad news for Liverpool, as we all know, is that it closed down some 10 years ago, following the release of the PlayStation Vita Wipeout game 2048. Indeed, the studio suffered the same fate as fellow Sony-owned Vita supporters Zipper Interactive and Big, which both shut down following their launch window offerings too. As noted by VGC, such a move is likely done in terms of the trademarking, in deference to the trademark itself. In other words, Sony has no intention of using it and is merely legally protecting it. However, the acquisition of Firesprite, which is widely seen as its successor, indicates maybe the brand will live again. But with trademarks renewed in 2001 and 2011, it's also possible, if not likely, that this is all a matter of course. Psygnosis launched Wipeout in 1995 on PS1, and it was the first-party team first responsible for one of Sony's most unusual licenses that it no longer has, which is Formula 1. So, if you're an OG PlayStation fan, you know Psygnosis. If you're a Wipeout fan, you definitely know them. This is probably nothing to worry about, but I thought it was really interesting. I wanted to report on it anyway. Cool to see that owl, that iconic. People that don't know that it's Psygnosis. And if you look it up, the logo, the owl logo is an iconic logo. It'd actually be cool to get a shirt for that. But nonetheless, we'll see anything comes of that. Number 8, as we reported late last year, publisher Sega lost one of its most important employees, if not their most important full stop, in the form of Toshihiro Nagoshi, who opted to exit his role as the head of Ryogakodoku, the internal team responsible for the popular Yakuza franchise. Indeed, Nagoshi is widely credited as the series creator and vacillated between director and producer, going all the way back to the series' origins on PlayStation 2 in 2005. However, Nagoshi has been with Sega since 1989, or was, and was a pivotal designer with the famous but now defunct Sega team AM2, which created Virtua Fighter, Virtua Racing, and others. What he's doing next remains to be seen, but rumors are strong that he has partnered with Chinese company Netease in the creation of a new team, and new trademarks indicate the team will be called Nagoshi Studios, perhaps invoking his growing auteur status. Netease, for its part, hasn't said anything about its dealings with Nagoshi, and Nagoshi himself has been quiet as well. However, Netease's investment into console and core gaming continues in the shadow of much more aggressive Tencent. Netease owns a portion of Bungie, the creators of Halo and the studio behind Destiny, as well as Quantic Dream, notable for its PlayStation exclusives, including Heavy Rain and Detroit Become Human, and most recently, purchased Japanese developer Grasshopper Manufacture, the team best known for No More Heroes, Killer 7, and Chris's favorite game, Lollipop Chainsaw. Now, Dustin, what are you thinking about this, knowing that Yakuza speaks to you?
Yeah, I am curious in that I always felt that you could take the Yakuza formula and apply it to other IP, a new IP, which they've done.
The Sopranos, I'm saying. I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah. Dude, imagine a Japanese-made Sopranos game. That would be crazy. But they've done that with like Judgment, and they did a Fist of the North Star game. And I've been talking with some of our listeners over in Discord that I've always wanted a new want that I have is a Yakuza style JoJo's Bizarre Adventure game, which I just think would be incredible. But I don't know. I feel like a move like this is something so you can create and do something new. Clearly, this guy has a lot of cachet. You mentioned the auteur status. What's the temperature on Netease compared to like a Tencent?
Well, they're Chinese, and therefore there's some CCP involvement, but they're not nearly as big or as aggressive. So, to Tencent's credit, if you want to say it that way, they don't seem to interfere with anything they buy either. But NetEase doesn't make me as scared as Tencent does. That's my take. But it just seems like they're much more deliberate. They're messing around with studios that I could potentially care about. So yeah, we'll see.
Yeah.
Number 9, in another piece of pre-release news that's undoubtedly better than the 500-hour completion snafu from a week or two ago, developer Techland revealed that it plans on supporting its upcoming game Dying Light 2 with at least 5 years worth of support. Word comes by way of social media posts from official Dying Light accounts, which states in part, quote, "We guarantee to expand the world of Dying Light 2 Stay Human for at least 5 years post-launch with new stories, locations, in-game events, and all the fun stuff you love." End quote. And how about more numbers, which for some reason seem to be a central part of the game's marketing campaign? The game's script is 350,000 words with 40,000 lines of dialogue. Dying Light 2, which is set for launch on PS4 and PS5 on February 4th, is the long-in-development sequel to 2015's Dying Light, which surprised critics and analysts alike with its strong critical reception and persistent sales tale. Developed by the aforementioned Polish studio Techland, the team once best known for its Call of Juarez franchise before releasing Dead Island on PS3 in 2011, the team wisely dodged further work on Dead Island following 2013's Riptide, opting to make their own far superior zombie game that combined an open world with first-person action, parkour, and platforming. The studio supported Dying Light with dozens of patches and multiple substantial updates, including a Battle Royale mode, and has been played by more than 17 million players by the end of 2019. Chris, why do they insist on this? Now, Head is the lead programmer there. And by the way, he let me know there's going to be a sacred symbol. There is a sacred symbol's Easter egg in Dying Light 2. So I'm looking forward to seeing that. But I'm wondering what they're thinking with this. And Head, I want you to kind of consider this too. Like, you're marketing the game wrong. You're speaking to people you already have. No one cares how many words the game is. And the 500-hour thing, you think after that they would have been like, all right, let's just back off the game. It's almost like they want to make the game, I don't want to say this, that's dramatic, but it's no doubt that as we get closer to the game's release date, it's like getting more and more muddy, where I just wonder, why are you doing this? You know? Well,
it is very strange. Like, I don't understand. I don't understand how this marketing has ever worked on anybody. Like, the specific, like, we've got 40 mentions of ice cream in this game, and it's like, all right, this is more like a factoid. This isn't like a marketing. This isn't like a commercial. It's just like this is like a, did you know? It's like those did you know gaming videos, right, where it's like, did you know that the script for Dying Light 2 is 350,000 words? It's like, all right, that's neat, I guess. It's like,
good to know, I suppose.
What do I get out of that though? Like, what's the game? I know most people who are like in on this game are going to get it anyway. Maybe they're just like struggling to market it because it's just a weird. They just don't know how else to do it, or maybe they don't want to spoil it by showing more. So they're just like, hey, there's a lot here, by the way. I don't know. This is just a really baffling marketing campaign.
What do you think?
Imagine, maybe this is a bad comparison, but like, take every script of every episode of The Big Bang Theory, and maybe it's 350,000 words. Is it as good as Dying Light 2? Like, the quantity has no factor when it comes to the quality of the game. Think of Journey, one of Colin Moriarty's favorite games. How many words are in that game, right?
It's all the words that are unsaid that are most powerful.
Right. Yeah. I feel like this is a marketing tactic from, I think, back to 2008 or something, when you think of how the expansion of open world games, I think of people like my friends saying about how much stuff there was to do in Assassin's Creed 2 and how that was such a big factor. You think of Skyrim, look at how much there is to do. And at
40 extra minutes of gameplay.
Right, yeah. We were so excited about this idea of, maybe that's from a time when just people in general had less games to play. So you wanted more leverage out of the games you did buy. But now in an era where, whether you're on Xbox Game Pass and have thousands of potential hours ahead of you, depending on what games you want to play, or even with PlayStation Plus, where you get 2 free games a month, or you have all these service games, whatever. It's like the hour count is no longer a primary factor of what people are looking for in the games. In fact, it's more often than not a detriment, because people are looking to play more things overall. Well, not everybody, but a lot of people are. The idea of a really long game is scaring more and more people away.
Definitely.
So,
which is good. They should be scared.
Yeah. Yeah. So either way, I'm that the inclusion of a sacred symbols Easter egg, very, very interesting. I think I just saw on Twitter, I think codes are out for this game, so I'm sure we'll be seeing previews soon. Not that I'll be reading or watching.
Yeah,
it,
Head said that he was like, because I emailed him the other day, and I was just like, oh, I saw the trophies, and I was like, congratulations, really looking forward to it. Hope everything's going well. And he's like, they haven't gotten in touch with you yet with a code, basically. So like they talked to us, but I'm like, I'm not expecting that. I'm really just trying to get in touch with you to congratulate you. So happy to wait. No big deal. Okay, number 10. The NPD Group, which tracks software and hardware sales for the American market, released its monthly numbers as it always does, this time for the month of December 2021. The best-selling game for December across retail and digital channels was, not surprisingly, Call of Duty Vanguard. So, if you're Sony. Interestingly, Halo Infinite, which is also available on Game Pass, slotted second. So I think that's actually the most important piece of data here. Halo Infinite still had really strong sales in a pretty busy month, even though it was on Game Pass.
Yeah.
Other notable entries include Battlefield 24 at 5, 2042, I'm sorry, at 5, Miles Morales at 7, Far Cry 6 at 14, Guardians of the Galaxy at 17, and Ghost of Tsushima at 18. When focusing only on PlayStation software sold on PS4 and PS5, the following represent the top 10 games sold in order: Call of Duty Vanguard, Miles Morales, Madden NFL 22, Battlefield 2042, NBA 2K22, Ghost of Tsushima, FIFA 22, Far Cry 6, Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart, and Guardians of the Galaxy. 2021's top 10 best-selling games in the United States were as follows: Call of Duty Vanguard, Call of Duty Black Ops Cold War, Madden NFL 22, Pokemon Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl, Battlefield 2042, Miles Morales, Mario Kart 8, Resident Evil Village, MLB The Show 21, and Super Mario 3D World. A lot of conversation about what's going to happen with MLB The Show, by the way, this year, because the MLB is experiencing massive labor issue right now. If the status quo is kept, there will be no season. So there's some conjecture on what would happen here. I think that would make the show bigger than ever. That's my theory. Reminds me a little bit of when the NFL season was almost canceled or curtailed. I think it was in 2012. There was a little bit of peak of interest because people were like, well, this might be the only way I get it. So we'll see what happens there. And finally, number 11 is a wrap up. According to a leak from Xbox Store, it looks like FPS Shadow Warrior 3 comes to PlayStation 5 on March 1st. Of course, you could beat Shadow Warrior 3 60 times in 500 hours, according to them. Website Push Square reports much delayed monster collecting game Monster Crown comes to PS4 on February 2nd. Tennis game Matchpoint Tennis Championships comes to PS4 and PS5 in the spring of 2022. A PlayStation 5 native version of Respawn's free-to-play shooter Apex Legends has been discovered by a PlayStation Network scraper, so expect a reveal of that soon. And finally, after being taken off of the PlayStation Store before Christmas due to popularity, Square Enix is putting Final Fantasy XIV back on the store imminently for both PS4 and PS5. So go enjoy that. That is all for the news, finally.
Yeah.
Let's get to the 6 questions, comments, concerns, thoughts, and ideas we like to end our show with each and every week. You can support us on patreon.com/laststandmedia for early ad-free access, et cetera, and to be able to submit these. We'll start with Ian Savage. This one's for Dustin. He says, hey, CC and Big D. This question is primarily for Dustin. With Elden Ring just over a month from launch, do you expect games media to bring up the challenge and difficulty conversation yet again? I find this still ever peculiar, especially as games from Software have seemingly become more accessible over time. Thoughts? Stay beautiful, from Bend, Oregon. Thank you, Ian, for writing in. Dustin, what are your thoughts on the potential of the looming difficulty conversation that never gets old?
Oh, yeah. It'll definitely come up, no doubt, because like I said, this is an opportunity for people to say something that they think other people like on Twitter. So perfect opportunity. Let's go. And I'm not saying that the advocacy for accessibility in games is wrong. I'm full support of it. But at the same time, I think that developers should be open to make the game however they choose. From Software in this situation with Elden Ring, I wouldn't expect any different from them. And again, said this before, I'll say it again, is that yes, these games are difficult. Anyone who says they aren't difficult is lying. But they're not as difficult as many From Software fans act like they are at the same time. It's somewhere in between. And I think that there are ways, if you play it, to make it not as difficult. It's one of those situations, as Colin's talked about with Habroxy 2, is that you can really make the game as hard as you like. You're never going to be able to do something to turn on it like an easy mode in Elden Ring, but go grind out some levels, co-op with somebody. there's plenty of ways that you can figure out how to succeed in the game.
Yeah.
So either way, coming up, man, so soon. I'm excited.
Me too. I'm really excited to see how it does and how it's received. I'm really interested to see how it melds open world with the From formula and how vast it is and how open it is and how rules oriented it is. Can you jump?
You can jump, but it is not quite a combat mechanic like I expected, like it was in Sekiro.
Interesting.
Yeah, it looks like it's a traversal thing.
Yes,
very interesting indeed. The next question is from Tyler Mitchell. We talked about some of this already, but we'll go back into it again because it does touch on some other things we didn't mention. It says, "Hey boys, I know this conversation has been controversial and annoying, and I promise I'm not a crypto bro. In fact, I don't believe in cryptocurrencies. That said, well, NFTs are the talk of the town, and while I don't understand the excitement from the art world behind artists trying to get paid to do art, I do think the technology powering NFTs could prove somewhat useful in the digital ownership space. If NFTs are just a form of digital ownership that can be transferred between users, I think the best thing we can obtain from this is the transfer of digital ownership of video games, movies, books, music, etc. Imagine buying the next God of War or Call of Duty and purchasing that game is no longer purchasing a license from a publisher, but actually purchasing that digital good. And with ownership of anything comes the ability to resell that good. I think this could open up the doors for the idea of a used digital games market. The only hurdle to get past, though, is what incentive do publishers have for selling their games on the blockchain? Maybe these goods can only be traded in their marketplace in which they get a cut. Maybe NFTs offer something traditional DRM hasn't historically. Anyway, long story short, maybe there's more to this than simple JPEGs. Maybe there isn't. Thank you, Tyler, for writing in. Now, this goes back to what I was saying earlier about this mantra that just because something can be done doesn't mean it's a good idea. Just because Activision approached Microsoft doesn't mean Microsoft should have purchased Activision. Just because you could attach wings to your body and then jump off a cliff doesn't mean you're going to fly. And I feel like with the NFT situation, and Chris, I kind of want to start with you here. I feel like people are trying to create these ideas in these markets that have no reason to exist. And it's not a matter of the publishers cooperating, which they won't, by the way. There's no way. Like this idea, did you see that thing with the guy from Linkin Park was saying, like, imagine if you own the gun in this game and then you can bring it to this game. Like, man, tell me, tell me how little you know about how games work. Holy shit.
That was one of the most eye-opening things I think I've ever seen, where someone would conceivably tweet that out to like hundreds of thousands of people and assume that made
Mike
perfect
Shinoda,
sense.
yeah, that's who it was. I like Linkin Park, but
I don't have a problem with Mike Shinoda either. I just was astonished by how ignorant that take was. Like, it's not how video games work at all. It's not how assets work. It's not how engines work. It's how none of that works that way. So just to see him so confidently say something like that, as if like it gives I was telling because I was talking about this on the Snark Tank with Sweeney and Derek, and it was like it feels like a child regurgitating information that like some adult told him. Like, oh yeah, the tooth fairy just sort of leaves a tooth. Like, what do you mean?
Exactly.
That's how it works. It's like no.
It's ridiculous, and it kind of goes back to what we were saying about Troy Baker too, where, and I think Dustin, you had brought up that's kind of like a predatory service that seeks to kind of supplant even some of the work that they're trying to do. I just think my take on this is that there is no need for used digital games. So let's stop talking about it. Used digital games, like. We've talked in the past on the show, GameStop had this idea 10 years ago. Everyone laughed at them. They're like, this is a completely ridiculous idea. The reason that there's a used physical game is because it's a physical good. People really need to get over this idea that the replication of physical items in the digital world won't necessarily have requisite or any value comparable to the real item. In fact, I'm of the mind that real things are going to become much, much more valuable. Like, I was talking to someone about this recently about just, if you find something that's 100 years old, let's say in like a basement at your parents' house, like no matter what it is, you should just keep it because it's just a 100-year-old item. And we're in this world now where they're not going to own anything. You're going to eat bugs and sleep in a pod. So
there's also, I mean, what's the barrier? Like the whole idea of digital in the form of like video games specifically, if you want the original copy of Zelda or whatever, it's like that's hard to find. There's a reason why you would want to hold on to that, but you could just a lot of these games you can just download, and a lot of the times they're really cheap, like Steam sales, and on Game Pass they're like available, and there's so many options by which you have to come across not only old games but new games as well, that it just doesn't. A used games market for digital things just doesn't make sense because there's nothing used about them really. Like it's just a new game, and at that point, just get the game, get it from a Humble Bundle where you can get it for like 2 cents. You know, like it's not. This is a very confusing premise.
What do you think, Chris? I'm sorry, Dustin. I apologize.
Chris, what do you think again? No,
Chris, do it again.
I hallucinated that in my head.
Stirred awake. I'm sorry.
So I think the main thing for me is, Colin, what you said about the idea of the selling the used game is just doesn't make any sense, because it's like there's no limited amount of digital copies of a game you can make. That doesn't make any sense. And that's the main thing for me with NFTs in general, which I don't know. What is there any benefit to moving digital goods like games over to the blockchain, and having it a GPU somewhere spending energy in order to verify that you own a game? It just can't see any tangible benefit in that application.
Yeah, I think I appreciate Tyler's open-mindedness very much. But
yeah,
but I just don't think it's solving nothing for anyone. And it's a pyramid scheme. Everyone be safe out there. Michael Lamoro wrote in, said, "Hello, boys. Do you think Sony's backwards compatibility focus through Spartacus will include frame rate and or resolution boosts for some older PS2 or PS3 games? Or do you think they will be playable in the same state as the past with no improvements? I'm playing Max Payne 1 on Xbox Series S now at 1440/60, and Microsoft's consumer-first mentality in this regard makes trying out older titles all the more exciting. I'd love to see Sony do the same, but I feel I may be let down. Thanks, gentlemen." Chris, you had brought this up earlier, this idea of what Spartacus will do with backwards compatibility. Do you suspect that they will go all out like this? Because I just feel like it's my idea would be like Sony goes and gives all these games trophies and does all that, and I just know that they're not going to do any of that. So my suspicion is that I just expect the lowest common denominator to be true, that maybe these things will just all be available. And that's basically it.
I don't think, here's what I think. I don't think they can get away with selling a console like the PS5 and market it as this big 60 frame, like this big performance boost for, the next generation. It's like the primary reason why people want the next generation consoles is so they can play the stuff they already have with, better resolutions, better frame rates, and also the new stuff that's going to take advantage of those better resolutions and frame rates as well, and really truly exhibit like what a next gen title truly is. And I don't think they can get away with having a backwards compatibility offering that does not take that into account. I feel like, because it is, I'll put it this way, it's a lot less jarring than you might think on the Xbox ecosystem to play a game like Fallout New Vegas, a 360 game like Fallout New Vegas on a Series X, and jumping from that to a modern game, because the frame rates and the resolutions really are, obviously it looks older, but the way you interact and the feeling of actually playing it really isn't that different. There's really not that much of a leap because of how much technology and how much research they've put into how they do backwards compatibility. And if you have this Spartacus thing, which has a whole tiered structure, one of the tiers basing on backwards compatibility, this is something that people are paying for. This is a premium. This isn't just like, hey, this machine just does it for you. You don't have to pay anything. If you have the old disc, it'll just bump it, because it's how that works. People are paying for this. And if they're paying for it, no way they're going to get away with 20 frames per second Metal Gear Solid or something like that at like 460p. There's no way. I expect bare minimum for 1440 60 frames for everything. That is my base expectation, and I don't think that is an unfair one, especially if they are charging people for it.
Fair enough.
That is the big.
I hope you're right. I don't know why. I never believe. I never believe.
Yeah, I understand why.
Chris, now explain it all again. I'm only kidding. Dustin, do you have anything to add?
I want to believe. I think that every single point Chris made is 100% valid. But this is Sony, and we've seen time and time again that we should just have low expectations when it comes to services and technical know-how. Not to say, I guess technical know-how might be the wrong way, because obviously the PS5 is a very technically competent system in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
But when it comes to backwards compatibility, and you think about PlayStation Now and stuff like that, it's like I'm not even convinced that these games are going to run native on the hardware.
They can't. They are not in a position. They are not in a position where they can let that happen.
This is arrogant Sony,
have
though.
But is it like we haven't really seen them really respond yet? Like I'm sure they're probably in that stage of arrogance. I'm sure the last few years have like helped that or bolstered that attitude. But there's no way they're feeling as arrogant now. There's no way that, as you said, Colin, earlier in the episode, that people at Sony, higher ups, are not feeling like the heat right now. You know, there's definitely consternation in that crowd, and they have to know that you can't charge people for fucking 20 frames per second PS1 games. They have to know that. I'm willing to give Sony the benefit of the doubt here. Like I am going to bet that is the case, that they will be natively run on the console. It might not be a large selection of them. That I think is probably you might see stuff from the PS Classic on there. I think that's probably true because they've most recently worked on those licensing agreements. But I do think they're going to run natively on the console. I do think that they are going to have a frame rate boost. I do think they're going to be up-resed.
Even PS3.
Because,
just to be clear, because I could see that with PS1 and 2.
PS3 might be the wrench in the PS3 might be a little bit more complicated. But I don't know, man. I think they could get away with that probably if PS3 is like, hey, PS3 might be a little janky. We're working on it. We'll patch PS3 later on down the line. I don't know. Maybe they could get away with that. Maybe not. But I would bet that they have that sorted out, because there's no way they would go ahead with this if they. That would blow my fucking mind if they just went ahead with, yeah, we'll charge people for this tier and have them just looks like a fucking watercolor painting, just this abstract rendition of what you thought a game looked like, because it's just, you can't even tell where the lines end because it's 240p on an 8K television. Like that's so big of an oversight that I don't even think arrogant like PlayStation 3 2006 Sony would make that mistake.
We'll see. I like your optimism. I respect your optimism. We'll keep it there. Nicholas Morano wrote in and said, "Good day, men. How are you guys feeling about Horizon Forbidden West now that it's a few weeks? You say 2 weeks out. It's not 2 weeks out, but it's more than that. But it's a few weeks out. I personally can't wait to try it out. I couldn't get into the first game after playing Breath of the Wild and The Witcher 3 prior to it. Maybe I was burnt out on sprawling Epic Games then, but I'm ready for one now. What say you all?" Dustin, what is your gut check on Horizon Forbidden West? My personal gut check on this is very high. I mean, I can't imagine this game's not going to be anything but excellent. But I said that before. What do you think?
I'm very, very excited for this game. Particularly, it's just that I am excited for them to take everything that was really good about the first game, make it better, and add new stuff that I think held the game back. Particularly, I'm thinking about, we've already seen how they're handling movement and traversal different in this game. And how do I say this the right way? Obviously, Horizon Zero Dawn, Breath of the Wild, two very different games. But when I was playing those back to back, I thought, man, I wish Aloy wasn't as grounded. Like the ability that you have to glide in Breath of the Wild, to climb things, felt so good. And so going back to Horizon, I was like, man, I wish this game had some of that. And it's clear that that's been a thing that they've added to this new sequel. So, and man, just so many other things too. I think this game looks gorgeous. and just a refinement in a lot of ways. And I'm excited. It is. So yeah, not quite 2 weeks, but pretty close.
What do you think, Chris? Are you excited? Are you looking forward to it? Do you care?
Yeah, I am excited about it. I think it looks good. It looks like it's addressed a lot of my problems. I think I had similar problems that Dustin had, where it just felt really. You felt like there was this big sprawling, environment laid ahead of you, but it all felt very kind of two-dimensional. Aside from outside of the times where you would actually climb the the long necks or whatever, it felt very flat. Like actually, like from a gameplay perspective, and it looks like this game has a lot of verticality to it. There's like a lot of underwater stuff. There's a lot of climbing. There's the gliding thing that, like you mentioned, and it just looks like it plays a lot smoother, which was my main criticism of the first one. Especially playing Ghost of Tsushima and finishing that, and then and going back to it, it did feel. I've said this before. It definitely felt like Horizon Zero Dawn was a good studio's first attempt at making a third-person kind of game, in the same way that Overwatch kind of feels that way too. Like it's like a studio really attempting an FPS really for the first time, and they nailed it for the most part. But there's some parts of Overwatch that I'm not a fan of, and there's some parts of Horizon Zero Dawn that like I think they could have refined, and it looks like they've addressed all of my concerns. And like you said, it looks gorgeous. So I'm stoked about it. I'm not like seething, like I'm not like hyperventilating, like counting down the days, but surely like when that game comes out, it's going to be the first thing I download, and it's going to be the main thing I'm going to be playing.
Oh, me too. I can't wait. And we're recording this on the 20th of January, so I do take umbrage at this idea that it's 2 weeks out. It comes out on the 18th of February. It's a month away. But we are excited nonetheless. Thank you, Nicholas.
Math is hard.
The Bussy Butcher wrote in. He's back. He says, "Hey, boys. I've been a PC player my whole life and foresee no future where I buy a console. That said, I've been playing God of War on Steam the last week and really enjoying the vibe and meaty combat. I think it's the best game Sony's brought to the platform thus far. My worry is around Uncharted, though. Uncharted actually will be on PC by the time everyone hears this. Steam will soon be getting the fourth game, and frankly, I'm not even sure what to do with this information. Is it worth going in on the fourth release if the narrative impact isn't going to land? Is there maybe an original trilogy remake and port in our future I'd be willing to wait for? A penny for your thoughts, or a pound for that Bussy." Thank you for writing in, Bussy Butcher. Now, I'm confused by this too. I don't understand why they didn't preface this with the Uncharted trilogy. I am of the mind, and I don't think it's one of my Final Fantasy VII remake things where people kind of really take serious umbrage with my stance. I don't understand how you could play Uncharted 4 and not have any idea what happened in the first three games. Like that's how does anything, to your point, how does any of it land? It doesn't land at all. There are entire references to the first three games that you will not even understand.
There's character arcs, everything about it. Like this was when this was announced, this was the first thing I said. I remember saying specifically, like, why would they do this? Like there's a whole trilogy. These are narrative games. If this was like a first-person shooter or like a multiplayer, like, hey, Call of Duty 4, that's not a big deal if you haven't played Call of Duty 1 through 4. If you're jumping into 4, because there's a whole multiplayer thing, or like different stories, it's different. But Uncharted is the same characters for the entire duration of the games, and you're just jumping into. It reminds me of how I kind of experienced Harry Potter, where like I watched the first three, and then I watched the last part of the last one, and I was just like, I don't know, I didn't know Helena Bonham Carter was in this. Like you just lost and all of it's gone. Like everybody around. I remember watching that movie with a bunch of people who were like watching this, who've been watching, and everybody's like, I was like, I don't know who any of this. I don't know who that is. Like it was just a very confusing experience, and I feel like a lot of people on PC are going to have that experience where they're like, oh, Uncharted. Well, if only the fourth one's available, then clearly that's okay. Because why would they do that otherwise? And then they're going to jump in, and they're just going to, I'm sure it's going to be like a fun game, and I'm sure people are going to get something out of it, but it's not going to be what they could have gotten out of it if they had watched or played the
right. And it's also going to be hard to go backwards because Uncharted 4 fixes a lot of things that people have problems with the first three games mechanically. I don't, what do you think, Dustin? Do you think it's a mistake? There's a scene, I don't even want to spoil it, in Uncharted 4 where I think of it and I'm like, how would you even understand how important this scene is if you didn't play the other games? It's not even possible.
I think overall, you guys are both right in that it doesn't make sense in that there will be a lot of PC players, but you have to also consider that there's been a meteoric rise in PC gaming over the past 5 to 10 years, in that there may be a lot of console players who played Uncharted 1, 2, and 3 and then moved over to PC and now have the chance to play it there, since they've gone not everyone, a lot of people will have a PC and a console, but some people move over to PC exclusively. So there is a market there for it. But I think overall, you're right in that it's like, why only do these two? And by the way, also, Colin, just to saving you from the comments, the PC version will not be out. Currently, there's no date.
I thought it was January 21st.
That is only the PS5 version.
Okay.
They said, it's the partners at Iron Galaxy, and will release shortly after the PS5 version.
Oh, okay. Yeah. You're right. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
All right, let's end with Matt Hebert. This is a light one that touches on 3 games that we've already discussed. He says, "Hi, fellas. There are 3 heavy-hitting open-world games coming in hot within the next 2 months. Elden Ring, Horizon Forbidden West, and Dying Light 2. I have enough time to dig deeply into one of these before baby number 1 arrives in early March. If you all could choose only one of these, which would it be?" Dustin, what is your choice?
If I could choose?
Yes. If you could choose.
If I can choose, because
why am I so incensed?
Colin, take it easy.
I know. Oh my God.
It's this. I know this Activision thing. You told me you've become the crying Wojak.
I have. Mike has been saying that to me all the time. She's like, "What's wrong with you?"
I would pick Elden Ring personally, because that is the one that is the most relevant to my tastes and interests. But it's not the one that I would recommend for everybody. If you've never played a From Software game, no.
You might end up getting so mad at the game and suffocate your newborn. You don't want to do that.
Right. I think that I think the highest probability of overall market appeal of these games is Horizon. So
I would agree.
That is the one with the highest potential of you liking. Second being Dying Light, Elden Ring being the least. If you've never played any other From Software games, you don't know what you're getting into.
I have a sneaking suspicion we could be looking at 3 9s, with these games.
Yeah.
Maybe 8. It's certainly higher than an 8. I would personally say, I'm going to say Horizon Forbidden West, just because I think that's going to be the highest quality game. I agree.
And I got all 3.
Huh? Yeah.
I got all 3.
Oh, yeah. Play all 3. I'm not going to play Elden Ring, but I'll play Horizon and Dying Light, obviously. By the way, Sid is shaken sudden infant death syndrome. What I meant is shaken baby syndrome.
Shaken.
So I want to just clarify that. Chris, Elden Ring, Horizon, or Dying Light 2?
Probably Horizon.
Yeah.
I think because I played the first Dying Light, and I could really only get into it in a co-op sense. Whereas I feel like Horizon Forbidden West is probably going to. I'm sure Dying Light 2 will be better as well. I think I have a little bit more confidence in Horizon being like a really solid. And also, by the way, I don't think Horizon is going to be incessantly long. Like I don't think Horizon is going to be 540,000 hours to complete. So
I'll only play if it has at least 300,000 words or 350 at best.
Yeah, what's going to be the word count? That's all that matters to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, 3 good options nonetheless, and that's it. That's all we have for this episode of Sacred Symbols of PlayStation podcast. Chris, do you have any closing comments?
No, I have not eaten today. This is the first time in a while.
I've not eaten either.
That I've been hungry at the end of an episode, but this is a long one.
It was a long one. A good one. Productive one. Dustin, thoughts?
I just want to say to everybody, just take it easy out there online. This is probably a tough week for the fanboys out there. And just remember, at the end of the day, it's just boxes that we buy from large corporations that don't care about us. And we're just here talking about it. So take it easy. Relax.
Ashes to ashes, bro. None of this matters anyway. Yeah. All right. Appreciate you guys.
Appreciate all of you guys out there as well.
Thank you so much for your love, kindness, and support of us on Patreon at patreon.com/laststandmedia. Free feeds. By the way, Spotify is taking reviews now for shows. So if you listen on Spotify, or if you just have Spotify, go review us. Leave us a nice review over there. Give us nice star ratings and all of this. You can find us on YouTube, etc. We'll have more merch news soon. Until next time, cry those teary eyes, my friends. It'll be okay.
Baby boy tears.
Goodbye.
See ya.
Take care, guys.
Sacred Symbols, a PlayStation podcast, is a product and trademark of Last Stand Media and Colin's Last Stand LLC, and is proudly recorded in the USA. The show is conceived by, is written by, and is directed by me, Colin Moriarty. My co-hosts are Chris Raygun Maldonado and Dustin Furman. The show is produced by executive producer Dustin Furman. It's edited by associate producer Ben Smith. All of Last Stand's theme music is by my best friend, Ramon Narvaez. As you know, all of Last Stand shows, including Sacred Symbols, are fan-funded on Patreon at patreon.com/laststandmedia. The following names are at the producer level on Patreon, our highest tier, and we're grateful for your thoughtful and kind contributions to our independent endeavor. Thank you.